deserves the credit for that.
Yeah, but I wouldn't have if you didn't bring up the details of it, then I wouldn't have picked up on it and like actually had a thought about how does the climate chart look like for Kherson, right? Because I don't think like that. You think like that. I don't, and it's good that you do. Anyway, see, teamwork works. Gunther.
Hey, Craig, it's good to hear from you. So, if from the Russian point of view, I think like a perfect withdrawal would be like slowly retreating back with lots of artillery fire and getting more and more into Kherson and having a sort of a reverse Severodonetsk where they fight the Ukrainians in a street battle and then retreat across the river in good order. What are all the ways that plan can go wrong?
So if you want to be technical about it, let's kind of drill down on the technicalities of what it means to fight with a river to your back. So where I would say that it's not quite Severodonetsk is that the Donetsk River around Severodonetsk is much slower moving. It's not nearly as wide. It's heavily canalized. It's a very, I hesitate to use the word, much quieter river. The ground around it is much more marshy. I will say that. So the ground around Severodonetsk it's prone to much more marshy ground, right? It's not a dry bank of a river that you might suppose, because the banks around that area are not as high, and it can flood depending on the rain levels, but it's very marshy. This is different because this is a much wider river. You can't exactly just hop on a motorboat with an outboard and take across 10 or 12 of your friends, right? Not nearly as much as you could because it's so wide, right? And that's a change in geography. So here's how that would work. The perfect solution for the Russians, in my mind, would be to give up Kherson now, to leave Kherson immediately, retrograde back as quickly and as efficiently as you can, and hold the opposite bank. Holding the northern bank of that river is the dumbest thing that they could possibly do, unless you're being ordered by the military to stand your ground and to not leave immediately. If that's what the politicians are telling the generals, then fine. But if you're a general and you have any sense of like, hey, we're fighting with our river to our back, that is like that is officer training 101. Never fight with a fast-flowing, wide river to your back. Just ask the Russians at Friedland when Napoleon pushed them into the river bodily, right? It didn't end well for them there. Great example of the Russians tried to cross that river in the Battle of Friedland. They tried to cross that river. They thought that they could take some ground and then defeat an army and then retreat back across it. Well, they got stuck there on that opposite bank of the river, and then quite literally French troops were pushing Russian troops into the river with bayonets and rifle butts. The Russians have no hope, zero chance of holding Kherson long term. And so if you realize that, the only thing that keeps you there, honestly, is a political order from the highest level of the executive, right? Because that is a lot of troops you're giving up. You would retrograde quickly and efficiently. If you're doing it right, you don't hold that ground. You use it as a defensive barrier, because this is Ukrainian land that Ukraine has to take back. They have to take it, right? Because they have to liberate their own country. And so what you do is, if you're smart about it, you retrograde quickly and efficiently, get across the river, train your artillery on landing points, train your artillery on logistical lines, blow up the Antonov Bridge, blow up pontoon bridges, blow up everything, and then sit behind there and then get into an artillery duel. That's what the Russians should be doing. That's how you inflict maximum casualties. But you also save a lot of your own people too. If you're to stay on the opposite bank and fight it out, you're going to lose a shitload of men. Some that might be highly trained men, highly motivated men. They're all going to die. Either they're going to drown in the Dnipro, or they're going to get wounded, or they're going to get shot in the face by a pissed off Ukrainian, right? From Irpin or Bucha, right? That's what's going to happen to you. And so here's how that would happen. You would have your front line, so just kind of draw a line in the air with your hand. Then you have your second, and then you have your third echelon. Generally, logistical lines are between your second and your third echelon for dispersal of ammunition. Those are the first things that you shut down. You shut down those logistical hubs. You then back up, depending on the space behind you, the equivalent of the distance between your first or third echelon. Back up that equivalent so that way your logistical lines are distance-wise the same as they were before you retrograded, right? So you want to keep the distance relatively the same so you can keep supplying at the same rate you were before, right? It's just math. You establish those logistical lines and then retreat by echelon. The first thing that goes is logistics. The second thing that goes is your first echelon, then so on and so on and so on. You just keep backing up like that ever so slowly while you're laying mines, while you leave behind a couple of platoons or companies to fire on Ukrainian tanks to give them a reason to kind of stop and slow down and not to do this headlong push and kind of, trip them up, as it were. A rear guard action, right, is the technical term for it. You fight this rear guard action as your main force retrogrades along the lines of supply. And then you do that so you would get to the equivalent of the distance between your first and third echelon. Take that distance almost like you're kind of pinching something with your fingers, and then where your thumb is, just use that same distance between that thumb and your index finger if you're kind of just looking like you're pinching something. Use that equivalent distance to kind of back up and retrograde, so that way your supply lines are not getting stretched as you go, right? You're maintaining the same distance between your frontline units, the guys who are actually in the trenches and firing at Ukrainian soldiers, between them and the logistical lines. You don't want to make them wider, because as Ukrainians come forward, you're firing a lot of ammunition. If you run out of ammunition and you're on the defensive, you're fucked. You're dead, right? you're done. So either throw up your hands or drop your gun and run away. That's how you're supposed to do it, right? Is to retrograde by echelon, logistical hub first echelon, first, second, and then your third echelon would turn into your first echelon, and then you kind of leapfrog over each other as you go back. But again, as I would say when I started this little soliloquy, if you're smart, you get out now and then hold that Dnipro River, preserve your manpower, preserve your logistics, preserve your equipment, and then force the Ukrainians to get across. That's going to cost them a lot of lives while you preserve your own, right? But if you stay there, you're going to lose a lot of men, equipment, intelligence, all kinds of stuff if you stay there. They're not going to be able to hold that. So it just depends on what the political order is in terms of what you're trying to do. And then again, looking at the calendar and seeing when the fighting season may start and stop, depending on, as Dominic pointed out, the cold weather might start, or it's harder to move stuff around when it gets kind of a little bit marshy when the weather goes from warm to cold. So I know that's a long answer, but that's kind of how you would do it by the book, as it were.
Yeah, thanks so much. And it just seems to me like if they're trying to do the retrograde action and the Ukrainians are able to put the pontoon bridges into artillery range, and then that screws things up. Like I could imagine that retrograde going sideways.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. That's my point about why you need to get out now before you're in M777 range, and it's so you don't strike the pontoons. You don't strike the actual road that you're driving across. You target the entry and exit points as it kind of bottlenecks, right? So as you kind of remember, this is why I brought up the example of those BTGs getting blown to shit when they tried to cross the Donetsk River in the Donbass. You saw the Ukrainians not targeting the pontoons, you saw them targeting the banks of the river. And so that's where you would focus your fire. And because those pontoons lead you directly to where your entry and exit point is, it's a big fat bullseye for M777s just to go to absolute town on you. And so it's over for the Russians north of the Dnipro. It's over there. All you can think about is saying, how many men can we preserve if you're doing it intelligently? How much men, equipment, and logistics can we preserve that we're not going to get absolutely chewed to fucking pieces as the M777s get into range? Launch a drone, get some intelligence eyes on those banks, pull the trigger, and it'll got a lot of dead Russians. You need to get out now before you do that. You can't wait until the Ukrainians get into M777 range, because you're going to get slaughtered. You're going to get absolutely destroyed.
Hey, thanks so much for that.
Sorry, go ahead.
Oh yeah, thanks so much for that. Hey, and just as an interesting thing to do is I googled like battle and bridge, and boy, there's a lot of instances in history of armies getting destroyed at bridges. Thanks again.
That makes sense to me, actually, because at the end of the day, if you want to go somewhere, you often need to cross a river. and you can't cross the river without a bridge or a ford or a pontoon ferry, as we've recently learned. Sorry, another Blue Peter level explanation. I need to get out of the habit of doing those. Nina.
Thank you. A follow-up. Thank you, Domen. A follow-up to Craig about this. You said that if the Russians would be clever, they would leave Kherson city now. But let's hope that they are not clever, because also we have seen that they aren't clever. Because if they leave the town now, they make problems elsewhere. So let's just hope that they are all going in there and all in. Yeah. I just wanted to.
No, absolutely. No, that's why I brought up that point of that those 30,000. I'll just call them people. I won't call them troops. I'll just call them 30,000 people. Some of them are combat troops, but that's why I bring that up, right? Because if you're going to deposit all those guys on the northern bank of Kherson City, not the Oblast, but Kherson City proper, they're all going to die. They're all going. I can't emphasize this. They're all going to fucking die. Okay, they're all going to be captured, wounded, or killed. They're going to drown in the Dnipro trying to get across. As soon as those M777s work up, it's over. As soon as you get an M777 range, it's game over. You have no hope, because you're landing and you're what you might consider to be onboarding on your side, which is the northern bank. They're going to be targeted by M777 and by HIMARS fire, and those are incredibly accurate weapon systems that we've seen over and over and over again. You need to get out now before the Ukrainians start to creep up. And all they have to do is simply creep up close enough to where the M777s can fix where those landing points are on the bank, and just start pulling the trigger and just keep going and going and going and going till there's nothing left of those unloading points on the far bank. And that's where you're going to see the real death and destruction. You're not going to see it in the city. You're not going to see it in the fields. You're going to see it on the banks of the river where they're trying to escape. And that's why I said, go ahead, put them on the northern bank. I wish they would, but I really wish they would do that. But don't think that you're going to see them all die in Kherson City. You're going to see them all die trying to cross the river, whether it's on the far or the near bank.
Well, the more the merrier, and just hope that they just go there, and then the war will be over sooner. The more of those go there, and yeah, thank you.
So, Craig, you said you didn't want to call them troops. Axel, are you around? I wish some linguistic help. Axel? Okay. Well, we shall return to this later. Remind me when Axel's back. Let's go to Dryfly, and then Patrick, and then Shipmate. Dryfly.
I agree with everything Craig says, except I'm just going to remind him that Putin's already given him Order 227. I mean, the equivalent of Order 227. No step back. I mean, they said that about 2 weeks ago, that there will be no step back. Anyone that steps back will be shot by the Wagner and or Chechens. So, I mean, I agree with you. It's going to be a slaughter. That's going to be ugly, but they've already kind of made that decision unless Putin's going to go back on it. So, I mean,
I think that depends. I think that depends, honestly, on the pace of the Ukrainian advance. If the pace of the Ukrainian advance is quick and decisive and scalpel clean, then I think you're going to see a pell-mell retreat for the river. I don't think they're all going to sit there and die, because here's the thing. Now you're in a siege. Now you're in a classic siege. The gates are closed, as Colonel Spencer would put it. The gates are closed. You can't get anything across the river because your landing and your onboarding sites are all targeted by M777s. Just let them run out of ammunition. I mean, quite frankly, you don't have to do anything except sit there and wait. You don't have to do anything.
I agree with all of that, but what I'm telling you is that they may retreat, they may rout, they may run to the river, okay? But the Wagner people are going to shoot them, and the Chechens are going to shoot them because Putin's given them the order, and they follow Putin. So all I'm saying is that everything that we talk about and all the contingencies and the expectations, I'm just saying you need to look at what the orders have been given to people who will not run from their task, which is shoot their own people. And so, I mean, yeah, I think it's going to be uglier than we can imagine. I mean, that's, I guess, is my point. I'm not saying that, oh, yeah, the Russians are going to pull this off. I don't believe that for a freaking minute. I just don't believe they're going to follow the strategy that you or any of the American officers are calling out, because you're not thinking like Russian politicians in Moscow who have already given the order that they're willing to kill their own people for their political aims. And I just think we need to wrap our head around that. Now, might I be wrong and might Putin be bluffing? It's possible. But again, I go back to Maya Angelou's quote, and I really have come around to believing it applies to Putin. When someone tells you who they are, believe them the first time. He told us he was going to come at us in 2008. He reiterated it in 2013. He followed up with the invasion in 2014, and then the Donbass in 2015. And in November, he told us he was going this path, and he did it in February. So I think at some point, we need to take the guy's word.
I see what you're saying. I see what you're saying, and respectfully, I would just push back against that, just ever so gently, and just remind you of the fact that the Russians realized that everything north of the city of Dnipro and Kharkiv, everything kind of, just draw like a line straight across that. Everything north of Dnipro, Kiev, Sumy, Chernihiv, Kharkiv, the list goes on and on. They were smart enough to realize that was never going to work. All they were doing was beating their head against the wall. They retreated all the way back to the border, and they reinforced and they swept around and focused on the Donbass. So they're not they're not quite like that, I would say.
I agree with you, but it took a month almost for him to get there. So you might see a month of chaos on the riverfront, okay, where you might see of that 30,000 that are there, you might see 20,000 of them captured or killed. I mean, I don't think people realize what a Donnybrook this is going to be, but it's not because they're not going to follow the logical path. If they were going to do that, they would have already done it. And I agree with everything you guys are saying. I think it's the absolute smart move. And had he done that, had he hunkered down, waited for winter, and then put the screws on the Germans, he's got a good shot at getting most of what he already has, holding on to most of what he already has. But I don't think that's what he wants. I think he wants it all. And I think he's got that megalomania, sickness that he's going to keep rolling the dice until he loses. He's going to keep putting it on black, turning the wheel, and then until he busts. And I think we have to wrap our heads around it. And to be honest with you, I think the reason the Ukrainians have not gone on the offensive yet is they're hoping like hell the Russians do, because it's going to make their job much easier. And I will listen.
Yeah, I'm good with all that. I think that you're going to see a new dam forming at the mouth of the delta of the Dnipro of dead Russians floating down the river and causing a logjam. It's going to be. I think we're looking forward to the day. I think it's a very realistic possibility that you're talking about a real route of Russian soldiers who are going to try and either swim the Dnipro, or they're going to be blasted off of their onboarding and their exit points, and they're just going to be floating down river. And we're going to see some pretty horrific images, ones that we have not seen yet in this war. It's one thing to kill somebody in the middle of a field, but when you have bodies stacked up on riverbanks, floating down rivers, Russian soldiers running for their lives, it's only a matter of time.
Yeah, I think Russians definitely shouldn't stay there. Sounds like an ecological catastrophe in the making. They should just, before they get told off by some NGO for it, they should really just quit it now before that happens. Patrick, you're next.
Hey, thanks, Norman. Craig, help me out with one thing. Why would the Russians, if they did decide to reposition on the other side of the river now, why would they be less vulnerable now than, let's say, if they decided to do it, weeks or months from now? Are the Ukrainians less? Sorry.
No. Go ahead. Finish your question. I think you're absolutely right. Go ahead.
No, maybe the Ukrainians aren't fully positioned. Is that the setup?
I think where you're going with this, correct me if I'm wrong, so feel free to step on me if I'm kind of off base here, but the reason you wouldn't see that now, I think, is because they're looking at two things. They're looking at the calendar, and I think they're looking at the political clock, right? So here's where I'm going with this. The Russian troops on the northern bank, that position is untenable. You cannot hold that line. It's impossible. If you stay there, you risk losing a lot of equipment, troops, tanks, logistics, ammunition. The list just goes on and on and on, right? You can't retrograde like that across the river in the middle of HIMARS and M777 fire. It's going to be an absolute cacophony of death, the likes of which we probably haven't seen in this war. If you want me to be brutally honest, you're probably talking about easily over 10,000 or more Russian casualties on the banks of the river. Forget about Kherson City. You're talking about tens of thousands of casualties there, if the numbers there that are reported are accurate. It's going to be an absolute slaughter. Where I think the Russians would preserve manpower is that if you're the Ukrainians and you're looking at Kherson City, right? You're standing there on the front line, you're looking at the city, and you have to go door to door and clear this area out. That means by nature the Russians have to stand there and defend it, right? That's where they lose all these men. But if they retrograde now and leave to the other side of the river, now the Ukrainians have to attack across a river, and now their landing and their pontoon sites can be targeted by the Russians, right? Because Russia has spy satellites too. Let's be clear. They have drones. They can see where this is coming, right? And so now the Ukrainians become the Russians in reverse. So it's not the Russians retreating across the river. It's the Ukrainians trying to get across it, right? And they can't use the bridges because those are blown. You can't use the railway bridge and pontoons. And so the Russians can now zero in on Ukrainian de-embarkation points as they go across the river. And now it becomes much more of a heavy cost for the Ukrainians. So it would be the smart thing to get across the river, pre-site those landing spots, and just pull the trigger on their shitty artillery. As shitty as it is, they got a lot of it. And so the Ukrainians would then be forced to say, well, geez, do we cross this and risk losing all of our stuff that we just got from the West and our newly trained guys that are motivated and ready to go, and we're just going to have them all die to get across the river, and for what, right? And so that would be a static line where the Ukrainians would be like, well, listen, the Russian infantry is kind of shit, but their artillery is so voluminous that it creates these disembarkation points, if you will, where it just becomes a killing ground if you're Ukrainian. So why do it? So that's why it would be smart for the Russians to cross the river now, pre-sight artillery, and then just lay in wait for the Ukrainians to do it. And listen, they might not do it, but at least you're forcing them to the decision, right? But if I could just kind of end on this note, however, if the Russians cross that river and put up a defensive line, that means they're not going to cross it again. They're not going to get over that river ever again. Now Ukraine is freed up to take those troops that were used for the assault and push them somewhere else in the Donbass, to push them somewhere else that Russia wants to tie them down. And that's what I'm saying. That's kind of what my whole point was. This isn't about holding Kherson for the sake of a political victory. This is about holding Kherson so Ukrainians can't rededicate those forces somewhere else. You have to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 more steps ahead, because if you retreat, you free up those troops. They can then go to the Donbass, Kharkiv, Oskil Reservoir, Zaporizhia, use it an offensive towards Melitopol, et cetera, right? That's kind of where I'm going with this. So everybody's kind of playing in this catch-22 environment, but I think the Russians, in terms of my political clock, they're trying to, as you said, get to winter, inflict as much punishment on Europe energy-wise as they possibly can, and hope and pray that something will happen that will save them politically, right? That's where I'm going with this.
Thank you.
Craig, you are on fire today. Let's go to Shipmate, then Nina, then George. Shipmate.
Awesome. Thank you, everybody. So, as I'm listening to this, from what I've been understanding, that, the Russians are pretty much trapped. Ukraine hasn't gone on the counteroffensive. And exactly what we're talking about. I don't see the Russians winning this situation militarily or politically, but I want to ask and propose something. Obviously, the tragedies that could arise from this on the Russian side are extremely significant. And in terms of war, dead Russian soldiers is a good day for Ukrainian war. But politically, I think in society, societal and humanity-wise, it's not a good day because there's dead people that don't need to die. And coming from someone who's experienced war...
I have a great idea. How about...
One second.
How about they just leave back to Russia first?
What's that?
Well, I'm saying, if they don't have to die, they can just pack up and go back to Russia. All of them.
Correct. So if that's what, right? There's two doors. There's the door for the Russian soldiers that from Putin that says if you walk through this door and you retreat, you're dead. The other door from the Ukrainian and the West that is, sensitive to society and humanity and prisoner of war, there's the other door that says, hey, you guys, we just wiped out 5,000 of you. Here's a bridge, and you get to keep your life. For me, I think that would be, I think that's the Ukrainian and maybe the advice from the West if they're taking it for, a great political move. Because if we can ultimately save these Russian soldiers and they give up and they go through the other door that ensures that they survive, that's a great day all around. And it's a slap in the face to the Russian military, it's a slap in the face to Putin, it's a slap in the face to the Russian government. I just think we're definitely waiting. I hope, in the grand scheme of things, I hope that these Russian soldiers decide to give up and become prisoners of war. I hope the alternative doesn't occur, but like I said, at the same time, it's a good day for war if Russian soldiers are dead. But I do think, the best scenario is these Russian soldiers giving up. Ukrainians pave a safe route for them to give up, and then it's a good day for the West, good day for the world, and a shitty day for food.
So if I could
can I read out something?
Please. Please.
Shipmate, sorry, but you have awful noise in the background. A cloud of thick smoke hangs over the occupied city of Kherson in Ukraine. Its very stench is evidence of Russian war crimes, on a scale almost too sickening to contemplate. The smoke comes from mobile incinerators that are running night and day. Vladimir Putin's paranoid soldiers are burning the corpses of Ukrainian citizens tortured and murdered on suspicion of helping the resistance. And they're dispatching the bodies of their own comrades too, hundreds of them. The Russians are killed by the constant pounding of Ukrainian shells from artillery placements surrounding the city and by highly organized secret units of freedom fighters. And the article continues. This was David Patrikarakos for the Daily Mail. Patrikarakos, I'm sure that's pronounced, for the Daily Mail. A week ago today, I think? Yes, we could go today. The Russians can already give up. Nobody is preventing them from just walking out of the city, walking, 10 kilometers or whatever it is to the front lines and surrendering. Most of them aren't even in the city. Most of them are much closer to the front line. If they want to surrender, they can surrender. They're stopping themselves. Other Russian soldiers are stopping them, sure. But this isn't the choice. This choice was always an option. This out was always there for
Siren
them.
Alert update. Odessa,
Contemplating
full
the
alert.
human cost
This message
of
has been
Russian
generated
soldiers
with municipal
who
data.
have, for the past 5 months, been torturing, raping, and murdering in the occupied territories is not an appropriate consideration. I'll leave it at that. Craig, you take up.
Let me just say this. The shipmate, you're hot mic'd. Oh, there you go. Let me just say this. There's something in warfare. Let me break this down by percentage, okay? There was a modern study done of violence in warfare, the psychological study. It's called On Killing. There was a book that was written by an author. You can just Google it. It just says On Killing. It was a psychological study of soldiers who kill and why they kill in war, right? Because by nature, war is a very ridiculous thing. You have two people who are perfect strangers picking up rifles and shooting at each other and stabbing them in the chest with a bayonet. Right? That's so illogical.
Odessa,
you can't even begin to contemplate
This message
it. And
has
yet,
been
go
generated
back in
with
human
municipal
history,
data.
some of the first skeletons that have been excavated were found to have spear points in their ribs arrows in their chests, axes, carved across their skulls, right? So this is, while it's illogical, it's very much a human behavior. And in this book, the percentage broke down like this. When you start to actually interview soldiers who engage in frontline combat, who are actually engaging in this, 25 to 30% of soldiers who were surveyed actually attack with a will to kill. Okay, so these are guys who are actually attacking and are trying to kill other human beings. About another third are kind of moderate and in between, like between panic and not wanting to do stuff, but they don't want to be left out, right? They don't want to be the guy who's not participating. And then another
siren
group
alert update.
are kind of stunned
Odessa,
and incapacitated
full alert.
and usually
This message
surrender,
has been generated with municipal data.
when you use those numbers as a broad color by which, a broad brush by which you can paint this, here's the fact of the matter, whether we want to admit it or not, okay? The first cities that were ever built were built with walls. Why? Because human beings will engage in warfare to kill other people. Forget about them surrendering. Forget about this notion that you're going to have 20,000 Russian troops throw their hands in the air and say, oh my God, no, because of those 20,000, about 5,000 to 7,000 of them are going to be motivated and are going to want to kill the enemy. As illogical as it is, that's a fact of human history going all the way back to our days in the jungle, coming out of the forest and creating civilization. It's a fact of life. And you just, no disrespect, shipmate, but you just have to get over it, okay? That's how human beings are. And so long as that 25 to 30% of those humans believe that, there's nothing that can be done except to line up an M777 gun, load your magazine, go into the city, fire the rounds, and kill them. The remaining, that 1/3, they will surrender, right? They will give up, they won't fight, or they'll just kind of muddle along until they can kind of wander off and try and figure out something. But those third that are committed to attack and kill, again, committed to attack and kill, those 1/3, okay, are going to force the remaining percentage of those troops to keep fighting. So please don't think, and I'm not saying this in a derogatory way, but please don't think that human beings don't have the capacity to stand their ground and kill other human beings. They have done it, they are doing it, and they will continue to do that throughout history until human beings evolve to the point where we're just like, what are we doing this for? This is fucking stupid. Like, what am I even doing here, right? That's the nature of humanity, and it's been like that since the beginning of time. If you think like that, then you'll understand why the statement you just made, with all due respect, doesn't make any sense at all. It's not because there's some grand political objective that these soldiers have in their mind. It's because they want to kill other human beings. That's it. And I'll leave it at that. But Doman, I know we have other hands up.
George.
Yeah, I don't know.
You're not gonna let me respond? That's not cool.
Dude, whenever you unmute your mic, there's feedback. That's why we mute you.
I get it. Can I respond instead of just being muted?
Yes, but that's why you should have raised your hand instead of just unmuting your mic, and now everybody hears me twice, like they heard Craig twice before because you unmuted your mic. Now you go ahead.
Thank you. So, I understand human psychology. I understand war. What I'm trying to point at is if the counteroffensive and the mopping up of these Russian soldiers, if that wanted to occur, it would have occurred already. And it would have occurred yesterday. It would have occurred the day before, but it's not happening. So what I'm trying to point at is what the Ukrainian and West strategy is with this. If we start the counteroffensive and we just start saying, all right, there's 3,000 dead. Now it's going to be a slow, just like we're all talking about. We know that reality is going to be a river filled with Russian soldier blood. It's going to happen no matter what. So what I'm trying to get at is I'm trying to talk about what the current Ukrainian strategy is and or the West is trying to talk to the Ukrainians about and advise them on, because clearly they're not sending HIMARS and destroying them and wiping them out. They're not shelling them. It's not happening right now. It's a waiting game, and that's what I'm trying to talk about, is what is the strategy? Is the strategy it's going to be slow and methodical and all the Russian soldiers are going to die? Because either way, they're going to die. It's very fucking clear that they're going to die.
No, they're not. No, they're not.
Then what's going to happen?
So they have a choice. The leadership. So let me break this down, and I'll try and do this succinctly because we do have a lot of hands up. Respectfully to you, okay? I'm going to do this succinctly. They have a choice that is decided by the officers and generals who preside over them in the structure of the military hierarchy. That's how it's been since the Greeks, okay? Soldiers will obey the orders of their officers, okay? The officers are telling them not to leave. However, if the officers and the generals receive political, quote-unquote, political permission to retrograde across the river, then all those soldiers will not die. They simply will not die. They will cross the river, set up a defensive line, and then be redeployed somewhere else, maybe around Zaporizhia, Melitopol, Donetsk, etc., etc., etc. Okay, that's what's going to happen to them. But if they stay, by the nature of war, by the nature of human society, if you want to really boil this down to the nut, let me boil this down to the nut. If they stay, they are in the equivalent of what state are you from, shipmate? Like, just give me a state, not the city. Just give me a state.
San Diego.
Okay, so you're in San Diego. So this is the equivalent of San Francisco. Okay, are you going to let troops, if you're an American and China lands and occupies San Francisco, are you as an American going to say, well, the Chinese aren't leaving. They're not leaving. They're not going anywhere. They're still there. Are you going to let your fellow Americans be raped and butchered like Domain had said? I'm going to answer that for you. Of course you're not. So that's going to require you to go on the offensive and to kill the enemy, right? If you want to be succinct about it, it's about getting in the trench and putting a bayonet in some poor fucker's chest. That's the way it goes, okay? If they retrograde across the river, they don't have to die. But if they stay, then yes, they will fucking die. And if they go into my home state of Hartford, if they try and take over Bridgeport, I will fucking kill every single last person who does this. It's not the Ukrainians' choice. It's the Russians' choice. If they stay, they die. If they leave, they can go die in the fucking Donbass, but they don't have to die there. But the political directive that has been a part of the military hierarchy since the beginning of fucking time, the first time some dumb fuck put a piece of metal on his head and said, oh, look, I'm king now. Go die for me. That's the way it goes, brother. I hate to say it, but that's human nature. And it's been like that for thousands of years. So I know we got a lot of hands up, but hopefully that kind of answers the question.
It does, and I appreciate it. So and I'm right, I'm a very strong critical thinker and problem solver, but if they were to retrograde across back, that process of them going and retrograding across back, would the Ukrainians then not take advantage of that and light them up?
No, because their M777s aren't in range yet of those far banks. The M777s aren't in range. So what you do is, like I just described, I'll do it one more time, but with all due respect, we have to move off of this and go on to somebody else. So I'll just walk you through it one more time. Okay? Take a piece of paper and draw 3 lines of equal distance between those 3 lines. Okay? Take a vertical line and then draw little circles, equal distance, 1/3, 1/3, 1/3. What you do is that you retrograde effectively, which is you remove the logistical lines equal to the distance between your first and your third. Okay, the first line retreats behind the second behind the third becomes the new first. Your logistical line is now equidistant to the first line as it was before you started this movement. That will slow the progress of the M777s down enough until you can actually get more men and more equipment on the opposite bank of the river. Are you going to lose some people? Yeah. Well, guess what? That's called a retreat, right? Believe it or not, in ancient warfare, the majority of death and destruction that happened in ancient warfare happened when soldiers turned their back and ran away. They didn't happen when they faced each other face to face, because you have shields, you have armor, you have all kinds of other stuff. The majority of the death and destruction that happened was when the enemy broke, turned, and when their back was turned, the majority of wounds were actually found in the back, where the ribs are in the back. That's where the majority of wounds and skeletons are found. It's not found in the front. It's found in the back, right? And so if you do it effectively, maintain a rear guard action, then you won't lose as many, but you will lose some. Tough shit, tough titty, but that's what happens. So you can either lose some, or you can lose the vast majority of them by allowing the Ukrainians to slowly walk your artillery forward, pinpoint these landing sites, and then open fire. But they can't do that if you're holding a rear guard action and you have some drones flying around that are kind of starting to pick off your artillery, which forces you to kind of slow down. And I'm going to leave it there. We got a lot of hands up. Doman, I'm sure, has the order, but we got to move on there.
All right. Well, thank you, everyone. I appreciate it. I'm just going to close with my remark. Thank you. Either way, there's going to be Russian dead soldiers, and I was just thinking of how to get a political win out of this. So I will...
Victory is the political win.
Victory is the political win.
Yep, and Russian shoulders is a dream. So, fuck them.
There we go. George.
Yeah, so we're talking about the South, and I know, Doman, I think you heard me say this about a week ago, and I think some other people have been on here. I actually don't think the major offensive is going to be coming in the South at Kherson. I actually think it's going to be a drive around from the Zaporizhia area toward Berdyansk with a wheel at Tolmak going to Melitopol. If the I don't know what reserve, I don't know what reserve the Ukrainians have. I don't know how many mobile forces they've gathered or are ready to commit to this offensive. But to me, that makes the most sense. That takes away even the fact that you even have to drive into the Kherson area. That would cause, I think, the Russians to just abandon it. If they realize there's a huge offensive coming through that's driving toward the coast and toward Crimea, I think they abandon that northern bank because they know that now they're cut off. I think from what I've seen, from what we're hearing from the United States about
Air siren alert update.
Dnipropetrovsk,
full alert. Zaporizhzhia full alert.
Now,
This message has been generated with municipal data.
The use has stabled off. I think they're building they're building a base of ammunition for the HIMARS, and I think they're going to use HIMARS that's not going to have the unitary warhead, but the alternative warhead when this offensive happens. They're going to catch the Russians out in the open. Remember, the Russians have equipment; they just don't have as many soldiers. They're spread thin. Now, if they do have 40,000 in what I call the Kherson pocket, that's even better for the Ukrainians. That means out toward the east, those areas south of Zaporizhia, they're not that thick. The Russians are spaced far in between, and I just don't see how they would be able to hold ground or have a defensive line once their first defensive line is broken. I don't know how they can maneuver soldiers to counter an offensive on that side. You're talking about now you've got the 40,000 guys stuck in Kherson, and now they're going to what? They're going to swim. They're going to use the pontoon bridges to go south. I mean, that's where HIMARS just comes in with the alternative warhead. It's over. You know,
George, if I could just offer a correction of a statistical nature,
this
maybe not of a
with
strategic nature,
data.
but a statistical that might influence the strategic option that you're describing. I would heavily push back until I see otherwise. I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm not saying go fly a kite. I'm not saying that, but I would push back on the idea that there are 40,000 combat troops north of the Dnipro River. Again, I go back to the geography of this. When people say Kherson, you have to remember that the Kherson Oblast is divided in half by the Dnipro. So when somebody says Kherson, ask them, which bank are you talking about? Are you talking about the northern bank, or are you talking about the southern bank? Because to say that there are 40,000 Russian combat troops in the northern bank, that would mean that there's at least 100,000 Russian personnel on the northern bank of that river. That's not true. There's no way that there's 100,000 or 80,000 there. It's not possible. I would say that there's 40,000 personnel that are there, but not these guys that are put into companies, platoons, organized military units, and brigades or BT, whatever the fuck you want to call them. I don't know, whatever's left, Boy Scout troops or whatever's left of them.
Greg, I'm with you. I'm just quoting what the numbers that have been quoted, but have been thrown out. I doubt there's like 10,000 guys that can fight north of that bank.
There you go. Okay, so okay, good. Okay, there you go. Okay,
I'm just quoting the numbers that are, and I think they're all bullshit anyway.
Yeah, so I think what they mean is personnel, not combat troops.
And let's remember, like really right now, a Russian BTG probably has 400 guys, and 200 guys just learned how to load their weapon like 2 weeks ago. So let's face it. But what I'm saying is, a drive, if they have the equipment, if they have the personnel, if the Ukrainians have it, if they have the stockpile, excuse me, I couldn't think of the word, if they have the stockpile of HIMARS rockets, especially the alternative warhead one, where that just shreds equipment, not necessarily heavy tanks, but your trucks, your your artillery pieces, because they have artillery pieces have pneumatics and all kinds of stuff like that. Shredding that stuff in the open, and now you're asking the Russians that are either on the north bank of the Dnipro or the south bank, that now you're telling them they have to do a maneuver warfare and move toward the east all of a sudden to counter what would be a Ukrainian breakthrough. I just don't see it. I see a rout. That's the way I would play it, but I'm here, and I'm not leading the troops, but I know that General Hodges has even mentioned that depending on what the Ukrainians have, that would be the gold standard, because you're cutting the Russian troops in half, and that I think would cause more panic than anything.
Exactly. Good point. And if I may just chip in, we discussed exactly this point with Ben Hodges as a support attack vector to cut through to Berdyansk. And I still believe that this is a very viable option. Whether it is the only attack vector for a sweep, I doubt it, because I think that would require substantial logistical capacity, which may or may not be there. But if they have tanks at hand, which they have nurtured, in those 4 tank battalions, which we all seem to have lost, certainly that attack would cut off the snake and may actually put the pressure on the Russians to leave, whether the sweep is concluded or not.
Yes, Axel. I think like an attack along that H30 highway toward Berdyansk, and once they hit, what is it, Tolmak? Is that the one? It's a
yes, Tokmak is a railway junction.
Tokmak. Okay, excuse me. Tokmak. Once your right pincer, let's say, hits Tokmak, then it wheels toward Melitopol. I think that would just unravel the whole thing in the south. I don't know, the Donbass we could deal with later, but that would completely cause utter panic. Because they know they don't have the troops, they don't have the expertise to do a maneuver warfare. You're talking about now, can you imagine now to have your troops drilled to the point where they're engaging, heading north, and now you're telling them to disengage and head south and then east, all right? The famous, there's only been one famous drive that's been able to do that on Western military, and that was Patton when he wheeled his Third Army from going from west to east to north to relieve Bastogne. That was incredible because he had his troops drilled to the point where they could do that. I don't see the Russians being able to do that. I think it would cause mass confusion and just a complete chaos, and I would see a collapse. But that's just me visual thinking.
A shout out to our now German friends for teaching us that, because it was actually Manstein that taught us that in the sickle cut around the Ardennes. So shout out to our Germans for teaching us that.
Yes, Eric knew what the hell he was doing, and thank God for the West and for the Soviets that Hitler sacked them. Thank God.
If I could just briefly opine, Doman, and I know we got a lot of hands up. If I could just briefly just say something about that. We're talking about a line of attack that is longer than anything that we've seen in this war since Sumy and Chernihiv. That is a very long road to drive down, okay? You have flanks that you have to protect. You have to leave troops behind to guard your route of supply. You have to leave trucks behind in case some break down. You have to have a reserve. You have to have something there. But I would say that the length of the drive, depending on the troops that you use, the longer the drive, the more troops you need. So it's again, just comes down to math. If you're going to drive from, say, pick a point, Zaporizhia, go to Google Maps, put in Zaporizhia to Bryansk on the coastline. See how long of a drive that is, right? So say it's 100 miles. I don't care. I'm going to use miles. I'm an American. I don't know what kilometer is. So it's 100 miles to from there to there. That is a lot of Ukrainian troops that you have to stack up. A lot of supplies you have to stack up. A lot of ground that you have to prepare with artillery fire, minesweepers. A lot of HIMARS you have to concentrate. Aircraft, intelligence, reserve units, supply units. You have to really stack up. You're not moving 10 miles down the road. You're moving like 100, which means you're gonna given today's information warfare, given what the Russians have, because they do have satellites, they do have the ability to collect some intelligence, and if you're going to stack up like that, they're going to see you stacking up, and they're going to make those preparations. So now you need even more troops to counter their defensive preparations, so on and so on and so on. So I'm not saying that you're wrong. I'm not saying that's not a good idea. I would just say that a drive to the coastline, given the amount of that Axel pointed out, given the amount of armor that they might have, that might be a tougher road to hoe than to take Kherson, redeploy those troops from Kherson, guard that area, right? Put them on the opposite bank, and then move around Zaporizhia. But to take units away from offensive potential to go somewhere else, your punch just the power of your punch just got cut in half. You see where I'm going with this? And so,
I understand.
Yeah.
I understand you 100%. But what I would say is it's all based on logistics, which I don't know what their logistics right now and how much of a reserve they've built. The other thing is, as you gain territory, remember this is Ukrainian territory, and that's where your territorial defense guys backfilling. You would use your experienced units as your mobile units, and you can use territorial units to filter out any remaining Russian troops. But like I said, it's a long shot, but it's all based on logistics. And you're right. The farther you go, it's an exponential formula, right, Craig? The farther
That's
you go,
correct.
the more crap you need.
Correct. Yeah, it's all math. You just need to break out a calculator and start doing tonnage, how much weight. So it's the amount of equipment you need, divide that by the number of trucks and transport you have, depending on their tonnage. That's your number. So the more personnel, you increase the logistics. Again, just break out a calculator and you can start doing the math, and then go by mile. But then you also need to remember that you need to leave troops behind to guard your route of supply as you drive forward, because as you go down, you have Russian units north of Mariupol, and then you have Russian units that could very easily say, oh, you're going to play that game? Okay, let me just turn around and start attacking your flanks. It doesn't have to be a hard cutoff. You just need to, again, the golden number is between 25 to 35% supply interdiction. That is kind of the golden number. If you're able to interdict that much supplies, then your enemy's ability to sustain, not to engage, but to sustain offensive movement becomes very, very rickety.
Yeah, but it still doesn't rule out to run for Berdyansk in a cut-off move as a support attack whilst you attack Kherson. Ukraine has currently double the size in terms of soldiers in theater. It's really a matter of logistics. And I wouldn't doubt the preparation of Ukrainians. I think we should heed very carefully the lesson which we've seen already, that they can move troops around faster than the Russians can.
That's right. Interior lines of supply. That's right.
Okay, before we get on to Nina, Papi, and Aaron, Axel, I have a question for you because we were talking about Russian troops on the right bank of the Dnipro, and Craig, didn't want to call them troops. Axel, question for you, linguistic question. Trup in Russian, what does that mean?
You mean the theater troupe?
No. Trup.
That's a larger size platoon.
No, in Russian, Axel. Trup.
Trupp. It's the same as in German as in French. It's a troop. It's a
Siren
cast.
alert update. Poltava. Full
What do you
alert.
mean?
This message has been generated with
He means
municipal
individually
data.
speaking, Axel. Like, what does troop mean in Russian? Does that mean
The word
personnel?
troop.
Yeah, there you go.
Okay, well,
Okay,
a stupid person. It's a stupid person. It's a stupid empty person, empty-headed.
Vishnikovsky's coming up to help us out.
It means body, the dead body.
There we go.
No, that is the empty person, a lifeless, soulless, empty person. Not just
dead person.
Yeah.
Dead person.
Yes, trub. And
we were already joined by our guest from tomorrow, who clearly came to check out our space today. Welcome.
Thanks, guys.
So, the lifeless, soulless body of a human being, trub.
Poltava. Full alert. This message has been generated with
I was
municipal
thinking
data.
about everything you were talking about, and the main thing is what I wanted to say is that Ukrainians don't need additional power, additional army to take their regions. So if we go to Berdyansk, if I understand it, okay. If we go to Berdyansk, we don't need additional power because a lot of our people is in those cities. So we come to city, have a lot of people that want to work with us and go on. But Russians need to have additional army to take. The next city, they need to left a few of their army in those cities that they take. If you understand me, I didn't speak English lots of time.
Thanks, Roman. No, I think we understood you really well. I'm just really glad that you're here and that you're already happily, engaging with our conversation here, and that we know that tech works for tomorrow, absolutely, and we'll be very happy to continue more into this tomorrow. Or if you want to ask, Craig or Axel what they reckon about any of the details here, we're very happy to opine further with you on any of the prognosis on the future of the Southern Offensive.
Prognosis maybe tomorrow. I
Absolutely.
Can say. You want it today, yeah?
No, tomorrow. But I just thought, if you have time, if you want to hang out, we're very happy to have you.
I just wanted to say about all conversations. Some guys said that we need more troops to take the town. I don't think we need it. We don't need it because I have a lot of friends that are now in occupation and they are waiting for our troops comes in their cities, in Kherson, Melitopol, and so on. So we don't need additional troops to take these cities, if you understand what I mean. But Russians do need more and more troops to just not to take, but to how to say in English?
To control.
To control, yeah. To control the cities, yeah. That's what I wanted to say, and that's all. Sorry.
Ponyo. Okay, you're currently in the region of Kherson, right?
Да, была школа. Сейчас мы здесь базируемся. Это уже отжатая. Идем дальше. Вот там на бугорке.
It was a question to me?
Yes, of course.
Please, can you once again?
From what I understood beforehand, you are currently in the region of the Kherson Oblast, correct?
Yeah.
Okay. How is the spirit of the troops?
The spirit of our troops is to go further, go, and just. But I'm just a soldier. I don't know the whole of plan of our commanders.
Of course,
just
no, nobody's asking. But that's fine.
But
soldier
inside,
to soldier,
yeah.
I'm asking that.
Yeah, but inside, yeah, we want to go forward. We want to fight. That's it.
We had this question many times over, that the motivation of the Ukrainian soldiers cannot be questioned. They are ready to free their home country. We often read in Western newspapers descriptions that, in the occupied territories, people are afraid, they won't fight, what happens with the partisans? You just gave us the initial answer. There's many, many Ukrainians ready to fight when the troops arrive.
The biggest part of Ukrainians want to fight. Biggest part. Like, I don't know, don't want to tell, like, I'm not a sociologist, but I don't know. I didn't see any Ukrainian who don't want to fight. Even русскоговорящие, Russian language speaking regions who today I will tell it tomorrow, but okay. Now I'm contusia. How I say?
Concussion.
Yeah, shell shock. I was shell shocked. Yeah, in a battle, and now I'm waiting for my medical support for me. Yeah, in nearest town to where my guys now fighting. But when I listen to people who are nearest here, yeah, like near the house, near somewhere, and people say that fucking Russians, we don't want to, they and other bad words, yeah, like they. No one don't want to break out. Like no one don't want to us to say, okay, let's Russia comes. No, I didn't see no one. I talked to a guy that said, I'm not for you and not for Russians. I'm like neutral. I saw one guy for 6 months, 5 months that I'm here. I'm from Kiev. I live in Kiev. I'm from Western Ukraine. So yeah, I'm like more. Maybe I saw that I'm better patriotic, but no. Here's the same guys, same people, and these people say, no, we don't want Russians here. We don't want. We can. Today it was few rockets. I think 8 rockets came in a town. They killed few people. Today it was today. and people say, "Fuck it, we don't care. We want to fight." So no, when Ukrainian army came here, the people just clap hands and wow, yeah. And when you came with Kalashnikov in a shop, there is like few people в Черговкасі, як це сказати? Like you have
Nobody's shocked.
yeah, no, nobody's shocked, but they say, come, you'll be first in a shop. You need first to buy goods. You don't stay in like in people staying 1, 2, 3,
You don't stay in a
4.
line.
In a line, yeah. You don't stay in a line. Just go. And I said, no, we don't hurry. We're okay. They say, no, you got be first in a line. And we just, wow. That more of us. I'm in Ukrainian, in Kiev territorial defense. So I am like a Kievan territorial defense. So I thought that those people don't like me because I'm from Kiev. You're from Kiev. You don't know what we are here, what we're thinking here, what we are having here. And no, they say, "Wow, you're from Kiev defense, and you defend us from Russians. Go! You will like." So that's all. I don't know what to say more. Just emotional thing. What I wanted to say here.
Дякую. Thank you very
Air
much.
siren
It's very
alert
much
update.
appreciated. Victoria.
Odessa. All clear.
Hi.
This message has
Thanks for
been
having
generated
me.
with municipal data.
Roman, we did not expect you today. It's just a little early, and I'm a little surprised to see you. But I'm glad you made it. I have a question for you. How do you feel? I know you were wounded. Do you feel better now?
Not much, to be honest, and I have a big problem with after that fight when I had shell shock.
Air siren alert update.
They
Odessa.
find
All clear.
something
This
bad
message
in
has
my
been
head,
generated with municipal data.
and my commander said you won't fight now. So think. And what I wanted to say, very good thing. Not good, but I forgot English. Okay, the thing about how is it enough of people that fighting for in army? Yeah, the thing is that you said someone. Is it enough of people that would fighting in army? Few of our guys write a letter to our commander that they want not much, about 10% of our guys.
Air siren alert update.
In
Odessa.
my
All clear.
підрозділ.
This message has been
My-
generated with municipal data.
In
Squadron.
Union.
union, yeah, in my union, and only 10% write a letter that they want to get back to Kiev to on renovation. Like they don't want to leave army, but on renovation. Only 10% of my battalion. It's 1,000 people, maybe less than 1,000 people, but enough of people. Only 10% said that they want to renew in Kiev. Other people are fighting or під бомбами,
Air siren alert update.
under
Mykolaiv.
Bombs.
Partial alert. Kirovorod. All clear.
Yeah.
Poltava. All clear.
Under
This
this-
message has been generated with municipal data.
We are living here in this reality. So every day you have a lot of. I lost my friend few weeks ago when I was also shell shocked. It was a grad. Was it was like 1 second. You
Air
just
siren alert update.
doing
Mykolaiv.
something and
Partial
in 1
alert.
second
Kirovorod.
just falls
All clear.
bam,
Poltava.
bam, bam.
All clear.
And
This
my
message
friend
has been
says,
generated with
I'm
municipal data.
300, I don't know, it's 300, it says like in Ukrainian, it's like you hurt it. Я правильно говорю? Hurt it. Like wounded.
Injured, yeah.
Injured, yeah. And lots of blood and all this thing, and I was shell shocked, everything, but even after that, we want to fight again. It's not a problem for us. Like you want that, but you need to fight out. But my commander said I can't do it because
Air siren alert update. Mykolaiv. Okay. All clear. And this message has been generated with municipal data.
Maybe I will go to, but I don't want, and a lot of guys don't want to do it. We fight again and again and again. But to be honest, it's not that war that is in cinema or in films. It's not that thing. You're just sitting under the shells. It's falling on you and falling and again falling, and maybe you have 5 minutes to go to toilet, maybe, and then you go back and then falling. It's a fight of artillery. That's why we need.
Mykolaiv. All clear. This message has been generated with municipal data.
How it says
anti-air defense.
Yeah. It's a big thing because if you're staying on a 24 hours on a shell, like bombs is falling, and it's physically and psychology, it's hard to sitting in a hole all the time and listening to when it falls and again and again, and it's very hard, but we can do it. It's okay for us, but it would be better if our artillery can put and kill those people that killing us. You're listening for me? I just talking a lot and maybe no one understanding.
We all understand you perfectly.
Yeah? Okay. Sorry. I just was. Okay, then I'm okay. Maybe tomorrow we will continue all of that, and someone takes the word.
We will talk more.
Yeah.
We shall be very pleased to have you tomorrow.
Thank you.
Looking forward to it.
No, there it is. Live on the Maria report. Yeah.
Slava Ukraini.
Героям
слава.
Slava Nazi.
Smert ворогам.
Victoria, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, Roman, thank you so much for joining us today. Again, I was really surprised. Well, hopefully tomorrow we will have a long, nice conversation about you being in the front line, but also talking about your interest in alcohol business that you may want to share with us. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
All right, let's go to Aaron and then Marina.
Okay, and can't hear us. Nina, go ahead.
Thank you, Domin. As I can't read Ukrainian, what's your name, Roman? Domin, can you say? Domin.
Once again?
Can you tell your name, because I wasn't sure I heard it.
My name is Roman. Yeah.
Roman. Okay. I want to thank you for coming here and thank you for fighting for your country and for not only for your country, for Europe and Finland also. I'm from Finland and from the it pains me to hear that you what you are telling and that you are injured, and I hope that you will recover soon from it. And
Marina, the thing is that when I was going to army on a war, I thought about Finland fighters. To be honest, it's true. I thought they so small countries that fight against Soviet Union, and when I was going, I said, "But we're a bigger country. Why?" That was a big thing for me that take me to this war. Then thank your nation and thank you for listening to me.
Thank you, and I am sure that Ukraine will win this war, and I just admire the spirit of the Ukrainian people and soldiers, and you thank you. Дякую. Слава Україні.
Героям слава.
Героям слава. Aaron, your hand is up. Go for it.
Oh, yeah. So my question goes back to when Craig was speaking, if that was okay.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Sure.
Yeah. Okay, so there's a lot of optimism on the space about the upcoming Ukrainian offensive, and I'm pretty sure Craig was talking in absolute terms of like they cannot hold the bank of Kherson. But I've also been reading other writings like what's been published in the Kiev Independent that offer some caution. So my question is twofold. One is, what do we know of the Ukrainian offensive power? They're very the question of like the Russian logistics and Russian weakness is not in question, but the ability of the Ukrainian army to actually go on war of maneuver and full out offensive. And the other question was, from what I was listening to, was as if that does happen and they move towards the Dnieper, then I assume there would be a lot of Russian artillery on the other side that would provide, I presume, quite a lot of cover for the Russians trapped on the other side. So those are my two questions.
So can you repeat your first question? I got your second one, but can you repeat your first one? I'm sorry.
What do we know? We know a lot of the Russian army weaknesses. What do we know of the Ukrainian offensive ability. So the Ukrainians have been very good in defending, but we haven't seen an actual offense yet. And my understanding is many of the key units of the Ukrainian army that is good offensive have suffered a lot of losses. So what do we know of their ability to go on the offense and get out of the trenches?
Well, I would say that this is not a question for somebody who has not worn a uniform or done close infantry tactical drills. I can speak to pretty succinctly to the logistical support that's needed and the mapping out of how that works by echelon. Certainly, the gentleman who just spoke is actually back up, so maybe I should let him answer that. My experience is not in combat drills. I would just talk about artillery and reinforcing that. But he's here. Doman, do you want to? I think is he up? There he is. Okay. And how do you pronounce the gentleman's name? I'm so sorry.
Roman.
Yeah. Did you want to answer that question, sir? I don't know if you were listening to what Aaron had to just ask. I don't know if he came back up to help with that answer. I'll be patient.
Okay. Do you hear me?
Loud and clear.
Loud and clear.
So the guy asks this question is very cool because it's true. We can't how it's say in English? We can't give a lot of people to die. Our army, like our army, is a lot of people is in Russia, and not so much people is in Ukraine. So yeah, you're right. We can't go offensive, like go and die all. We can't do this, but in Kherson, we can do this because we can fight with bridges. We can hit the bridges, and if we hit the bridges, no army Russian, no постачання, how is called? Like it's not like the fight between Russians fight like they hold people like a meat. They shoot it and they don't care about that. They don't care about meat. But we don't need that. And we are waiting, like in Kiev region and Sumy region, Chernihiv region, we cut their постачання. We cut their lines, and we cut the lines, and we fight them with head. I don't know how to say it. Sorry, maybe it was bad.
Roman,
yeah,
we have Victoria here. If you want to say it in Ukrainian, and maybe she can help you out.
Ми обрізаємо постачання і після цього виганяємо їх з країни.
We just cut their connections and then we just kick them out of country.
Like communications, like logistics connections.
Yeah, more like communication, yes.
Bridges, etc. Yep, got it.
Yes.
Там we have only 3 bridges, 4 bridges, I don't know, 3 or 4. I'm in Kherson Oblast. They are afraid of us. Look, I can tell you the thing how it's going in there in fighting region. Every 2 weeks they changing people there. We are standing there 5 months, and we saw this. We saw 2 beta air, I don't know, English better. Like they two.
We know what BTRs are. Don't worry.
Yeah. Two BTR coming on us. We shooting on the BTR, on the first BTR. Everyone is just jumping from this BTR and running away. It's the same thing every 2 weeks. Every 2 weeks they come to BTR, and every 2 weeks is the wrong people. The інші люди. Victoria?
Other people.
That other people. Every 2 weeks, other people. So they have changing. They have, I don't know, few BT gear and put it on our way. They running away, and then they put another BT gear away.
Victoria, is this reinforcements? Sorry, I can't hear him. Is he saying reinforcements?
Yeah, I think that's
or rotations.
Rotation. Okay, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Forgive me. I'm sorry to cut you off.
Yeah, rotations every 2 weeks. Every 2 weeks they rotate. And this is like it's funny for our army, because everyone knows every 2 weeks we have attack. We must just kill them. Будь-якими способами. Any способами.
Just kill them no matter what.
Yeah. And they run away. And that's all. That's the fact. It's fact. Just sorry.
By the way,
he means that they have to use any way to kill them. So they just do whatever they can to kill them. That's what he meant.
He reminds me of a British soldier I met in Ukraine. He's fighting there. I asked him how much ammunition he needs to take when he goes to fight. He says only a minimal amount, because he can be pretty sure of picking up Russian ammo that's been left as they run away.
Just has to make sure that it fits. Let's go to Ben and to George. Ben.
Oh, sorry. I'm not sure if the other question was answered though. So I'm not sure if that answers my first question or not. Like, it definitely answers the motivation part, although not necessarily the actual strength part. But then, Craig, I think you said that you could answer the second part. If there is a breakthrough on that side of the Dnieper, then how much are the Russians really against the wall, when I'm pretty sure that the Russians could rush a lot of artillery on the other side? So, like, it's similar to like where you can be driven onto the beach, but if you have a navy supporting you, then you're not that much against the wall. Like yeah,
you're talking about the Kherson Dnipro, not around like Zaporizhia towards the coast, right? You're talking about that when you say Kherson.
Yes, definitely. Yeah, because and when I mentioned the Navy, I was thinking more like the British Navy back in the day with all the big guns. But there's no, in principle, like the Russians can just put a load of artillery and there's not a lot you can do. So yeah, you can get the M777s within range, but there's still going to be other artillery on the other side.
Right, but if you look at this is the measurement. This is the measurement exercise that we used to have to do.
This message has been generated with municipal data.
Equation. So what's helpful is that what got me through school is that I just take out a blank piece of paper, right, and then you draw 2 lines that are the river. Okay, so that's your river, right, and then you have the left or the right bank, depending on how you're drawing your picture. Okay, if you're on the left bank, then trying to hit the right bank is further away than the enemy on the right bank trying to hit the same bank. And so there's a distance equation that goes into that, okay? So again, we'll just kind of map it out like this. Draw two lines that are straight across the piece of paper. If you're on the top half and you're trying to hit the bottom line, you're further away
siren alert
than the
update.
one who's on the bottom line trying to hit the same line that you are. You with me?
Zaporizhzhia. All clear.
Yes,
this
but we're only
message has
talking
been
about
generated
like,
with
what,
municipal data.
1,000 meters, and the type of guns we're talking about will be very important in this case, right?
Right, but you're right. But what I'm saying is that you have to maintain a certain distance away to not get so close for counter battery fire, right? That's again goes into the distance equation, right? Because you can only get so close to hit the opposite bank before you get into counter battery fire, right? And then you have to start to slowly walk your artillery up to the near bank to get further and further to prep a landing or to prep a crossing to give your troops a chance without having artillery shells raining down on their heads. So you have to push their artillery back far enough away to where you can secure a beachhead and you don't have shells just drowning on top of you. But that entire kind of
siren alert update.
Discussion that we're having takes away
all
from
clear.
a strategic question.
All clear. This message has been generated with municipal data.
To try to cross the river in force. We're not talking about special forces. We're not talking about a company. We're talking about battalions. We're talking about brigade strength movement. Is it worth it to deal with that incoming fire, the mines, the defensive emplacements, all this stuff that you have to go across, all the problems that go into crossing river that I'm sure CJ, as an artilleryman here, is more than willing and capable of describing, but I'll just kind of sketch this out. If you push the Russians to the far bank, let's just say the Ukrainians slaughter every single Russian that's north of the Dnipro. They're all dead, right? Stop. Now you have a strategic question. Do you take those troops that just pushed the Russians out and redeploy them to the Zaporizhzhia region, which is what Axel is talking about, right? And use them for that drive to cut that in half and then divide the Russians? Okay, that's number one, right? Do you do that because the Russians can't get over the Kherson, can't get over the Dnipro River because you're now holding that line, right? And so they can't recross it because the bridges are blown. They can't get over it. So now you can redeploy those forces over to that side. And so I think what the thrust of where we're trying to go with this conversation is, in my mind, it's better for the Russians to evacuate Kherson now, get out now while you have the troops and the units and the equipment and logistics intact. Leave yesterday and then use that as a defensive line, because in warfare, you don't need as many defenders as you need attackers. Redeploy some of those troops south of Zaporizhzhia to hold that line and create a static emplacement. That's what you should do, because if not, just as Roman just described, they're all going to die. All those Russians are going to die if they stay there. So they need to get out now. But I think the only reason that they are there are for political reasons, as most people thought, but not for the political take over Kherson and annex that territory, but political in terms of trying to stretch this war out to get us into winter, to start trying to, maybe change the mindsets of some people in Europe. That's not going to happen, but what else is Russia's hope, right? It doesn't have any other thing except to hope some kind of political division will be created by the Allies, but that's not going to happen. But what's the other option? That's like the main thrust of what I'm getting at. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does make sense. It's not quite what I was asking though, but it makes sense. So my question was more not what strategically is a better or a worse decision. If we just take it as read that the Russians stay on that side of the bank, and if we assume that the Ukrainians have enough force to go on the offensive and they break the Russian line, so they start to fall back. Now, my question was, if the Russians have a supply problem, but they don't have a supply problem on the other side of the bank. So what's stopping them from bringing up a lot of artillery on the other side of the bank and supporting their retreating forces? Would that be enough, in theory, what they could bring up and the logistics they could supply on the other side of the bank, firing across the river, to support their retreating forces on their narrowing, fulling bridgehead, to seriously blunt?
I see what you're saying. I see what you're saying. You're saying use the artillery on the far bank to support your forces as you contract towards that area. But here's the problem. You don't, if you're the Russians, you don't want to contract yourself that much, because then the Ukrainians have superior artillery, They have superior intelligence. They have HIMARS. They have partisans that are going around cutting people's throats. They have what you might consider to be, for those that are not familiar, they're not insurgents. So let me make that clear. They're not insurgents, but to engage in partisan warfare, the more you kind of spread out, the harder it is for Ukraine to find targets of opportunity and really blow up frontline units. But the more you contract yourself to get to have your artillery support you, it actually becomes you're building your own coffin, because the tighter you contract, the more of a target you make yourself. But the more you spread out, the harder it is for Ukrainian artillery to find targets of opportunity to really cause damage. Do you see what I'm getting at? Like, you can't do that and retrograde and then hold a line and hope your artillery can do that, because now you've shelled up, and now you're just this big blob of infantry that you can just be shelled to pieces by M777 and by HIMARS. So do you see what I'm getting at? Like, you can't do that.
You're getting a Dunkirk.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you're shelling up and you're creating a big blob of infantry that can be shelled by superior artillery. And now you're creating a proper siege. So as Colonel Spencer would call it, the gates have closed on Kherson, right? You're now in the siege. The bridges are blown. So now the Ukrainians don't have to do anything except just sit and wait for you to starve to death, right? But then you have to take into consideration there are innocent civilians there. The Russians are going to use them as human shields, all the rest of these horrible, nasty things that Russians like to do because they're really bad people, right? And really terrible soldiers, if you want to be quite honest with it. They're not professionals at all. So hopefully that answers your question. I don't want to linger too long on it because we got a lot of hands up, but hopefully that does the trick.
Yeah, that's a pretty good question. Answer. I'm not sure if the first question was answered. I'm not sure, Domian, if you want to go to the other hands, but like the other guy said a lot about the will of the Ukrainians, but how much do we know of the actual offensive ability of the Ukrainians? We've never seen them go on the offensive in any large way.
We have seen them go on the offensive. We have seen them go on the offensive around Kharkiv. We've seen them go on the offensive around Sumy. We have seen large brigade-like actions, combined arms activity around Kharkiv in the first stages, the first, say, quarter of the war. There were brigade-level combined arms attacks, proper formations, engaging the Russians and pushing them all the way back to the border. We saw another counteroffensive around Irzum. We saw another counteroffensive south of Kryvyi. There was actually a pretty big battle, pretty big fight that it doesn't get a whole lot of publicity because a lot of stuff was happening in the Donbass at the same time around Severodonetsk. But there was a very strong thrust by the Ukrainians using combined arm tactics south of Kryvyi all the way to the eastern bank. Excuse me, I beg your pardon, the western bank of the Dnipro. So they have executed these, but the trouble is, if you want me to be frank, the trouble is that this is where I get into my clock. This is where I get into the 4-minute drill. I hate to sound so redundant, but if you have them right where you want them, right? You got them somewhat bottled up in this area. You don't have to risk your troops in headlong thrusts, because here's the thing. You can stack your troops up, okay, and thrust through all the way to the bank. Sure. But here's the question. Then what? Do you turn south and close off Kherson? Because then Russian troops can then counterattack to the south and cut you off. It's like counterpunching in boxing, right? So if anybody's ever been a boxer before, they understand the principle of counterpunching, right? Which is let your opponent punch, slip, and then counterpunch where they're exposed. And so they risk doing that. So if you do that too quickly, then it leaves the Russians enough time to try to put themselves together. Now, Doman kind of pointed out that maybe it doesn't get too rainy, the weather doesn't get too bad there, but I would still preface you by saying I think the Ukrainians are taking their time. They're setting, as CJ would say, they are staging, they're setting the table. Now they just need to wait for the steak, right? And so I think we're just seeing a slow, mature operation, right, by which the Ukrainians are going to do this on their clock, and we just have to be patient. But with that, I think we got a lot of hands up. But hopefully that kind of, narrows it down just a little bit.
And just to, again, right, before we're accused of not answering the question again. Kharkiv sweep, Izium counteroffensive, Kiev counteroffensive, hell, 2014, 2015, right? There have been plenty of previous counteroffensives. So we have seen them go on the counteroffensive. I mean, And at the end of the day, if you say, oh, but we haven't seen them go on the counteroffensive yet, can they ever make a counteroffensive? That's a slight logical fallacy, because then by that logic, no counteroffensive would ever have happened in the first place anywhere in the history of warfare. So that doesn't really stack up as an argument in the first place. Right, let's go to Ben, then to Nina, and then to George. Ben.
Thank you, Domin. Craig, I've got a question for you. Please bear with me and be patient. I'm really not good at this thing, but about an hour ago, you were explaining how the Russian had the perfect Petrov defense, and where they just had to take a step back and then push a little bit in Kherson, and they would be untakeable in the Donbass, and then that would be it. And right now, you exposed just every bit as convincingly how the Ukrainians were at a path of action that would take them all the way straight to, if not Moscow, but like Mariupol by the end of September or something. Which one of those two options do you think is the easiest and most probable to happen?
So let me clarify my statement. If I heard you correctly, then I might have contradicted myself, as that's kind of the intimentation of what you were saying.
No, I'm not saying that you contradicted yourself. I'm saying that you presented a very good plan for the Russians and a very good plan for the Ukrainians.
I see.
I'm wondering which one of the two do you think is the most likely, the easiest to happen?
Kherson. I think that, like I said, this depends on a lot of factors, including political will. But we have to remember, too, that as I said last night, the Russians tend to like to run that phrase, war is an extension of politics, right? As Louis XIV would say, war is the last argument between kings. The Russians are trying to kind of invert that model, as I said. They're trying to use politics to set the ground militarily. But if you decided to use the military, then you have to use it to crush the military. You can't use it any other way. You have to achieve the victory. Once you've achieved the victory, then you can dictate the politics. It doesn't run. It's not inverted like that. And so, to answer your question succinctly, I believe that the easiest thing, the best option would be for the Ukrainians to take Kherson, liberate the city, great political win, and great strategic release of manpower to other places, because the Russians cannot recross that river. Once they've been pushed into the river with bayonets and with trucks, they're not going to recross it. All they can do is kind of hold that line. And then that gives you the ability to then take some of those combat troops and that equipment and that infantry and everything that you got, reposition them elsewhere. That's why I would say, if you're the Russians, you have to get out now. You have to get out now, because the majority of those troops are going to die, and you're going to need those around Zaporizhia, Melitopol, all the rest of these things to kind of influence and try and allow some measure of stagnation by the Ukrainians if they go on the offensive, because it's going to be far more costly to go on the offensive than it is on the defensive. And so if you're the Russians, I'm looking at Putin, I'm saying we need to get out now, retrograde now, and get out of artillery range. This is a coffin we're building for ourselves. Let's get out, set up an artillery defensive line, let them have Kherson, and then we'll redeploy somewhere else. At least we'll have extra manpower that we wouldn't otherwise have, because you do this and you're taking 20,000 Russian troops off the board. Why would you do that? And so I think the Russians are trying to, again, delay until the winter. Hopefully that allows, I'm not saying hopefully as in like I wish, but I'm saying from their position, they're hoping that winter will create some political instability in the West. We're going to put pressure on each other to find some sort of deal here. And then hopefully right then and there, you can have your little political ceasefire, right? But the Ukrainians aren't playing that game. I'll go all the way back to Zelensky's statement that he made last week, where he said, this started in Crimea and it's going to end in Crimea. That's the last thing the Russians want to hear. They don't want to hear that, right? Because they need you to engage in diplomacy so that they can manipulate the situation to their advantage. If you say, screw it, I'm not even going to talk to you again until you're dead, then they're like, oh, crap, this sucks. And so hopefully, I know that's kind of like a long-winded way of answering it, but there's just so many pieces to put into there in terms of logistics, manpower reallocation, logistical reallocation, right? The logistical lines running into Kherson right now were absolutely garbage right now. you're not going to be able to sustain that. So, but if you run east towards Tumuk and towards Melitopol, your logistical lines improve somewhat, and you could hold that line just a little bit better for at least a little bit longer. But it's only a matter of time. So I know that's a long-winded way of saying it, but hopefully that answers it. Sorry, Ben.
I would have rather you speak another 10 minutes, but as you wish.
George and then Nina, please.
Hey guys, hey Greg. I agree with everything you're saying. Just remember the combat season in the south is longer than the one in the Donbass, probably by about a month, depending, And the other thing is, I think a lot of people, because we keep talking about HIMARS, the Ukrainians have been using them as a surgical weapon right now, right? Striking depots, precision strikes, they're deadly accurate. What no one's mentioned is, I think we now have at least 9 MLRS launchers in the country, right? Am I right on that, Craig? Or
probably more than that.
Okay, so yeah, hopefully more. They launched 12 Gimler's rockets. Now, like I said earlier, the Gimler's rockets that the Ukrainians have been using up to this point that I know of, I haven't seen any evidence contrary, are the unitary warhead ones, right? The ones with the one big the one explosive, they take out, ammo dump, this and that. And they haven't been using what are called the area, like the ones that are alternative warheads, which is like a big shotgun shell when it explodes. Well, back in the day, we used to call it the finger of God. I don't know if anybody else has heard that terminology for MLRS. And those were not Gimler's rockets. They were pretty accurate, but not as accurate as the ones now. And what that means is it takes out a grid square on the map. You would need several of them, and they would take out a grid square on the map. That means you have an enemy position, right? Let's say a thermobaric battery, right? 3-4 launchers, whatever. Well, they're in a grid, 1,000 meters by 1,000 meters square. Now, because of the Gimler's rockets, one launcher, not one battery, one launcher can actually vaporize that 1 square meter block. You have to understand what that means. I mean, the Russians keep talking about the thermobarics. We saw them using them against civilians, and I think it was Pisky. We saw some video of that, which is horrific. They have not gotten the surprise they're about to get. So any offensive, and I forget who it was it Ben? I think was asking about, when the Russians retreat across the river, and they're going to move up their artillery, that's going to be as bloody suicide. Because those Gimler's rockets coming from an MLRS system are just going to catch them by surprise. The Ukrainians are going to be using drones. They're going to be spotting this stuff. They're going to know where the gaps are. And as soon as they move up, and remember, MLRS systems, remember what the Germans call the Mars? They're a tracked vehicle. They don't move as fast, but they still have the same bloody range. We're talking about at least 90 kilometers, right? So they could blast them on the south bank, all the way from Mykolaiv, right, which is the town just due northwest of Kherson. Am I right on that, Greg?
Yeah, but I think you're missing. If I might, sorry, if I could just briefly step in for just a second.
Sure.
I think what we're missing is that when you again go all the way back to when the Russians tried to cross the Severodonetsk River with those 2 or 3 BTGs, and these BTGs were wiped out. I mean, like gone. They don't exist anymore. The trouble is that when you're trying to cross a river, unlike, of course, land, you can spread out more on the land. But as you go to the river, you're forced to bottleneck as you disembark, if you will, if I could use that terminology. As you disembark and you spread out, you create a little bit of a bottleneck. And so you're much more of a vulnerable target. And so, yes, the HIMARS is going to have an effect to push some of this artillery back. I would agree with you, yes. But it's the bottlenecking of those logistical lines, both the embarkation and de-embarkation points, if you will, on the pontoon side as you cross that river, that create these bottlenecks to where you only really need, if CJ was here, if you got 152s, maybe 2 or 3 batteries to really affect a complete devastation of that bottleneck. And so,
yes.
so that's my point.
I agree with you.
Yeah, so that's why I'm saying, yes, Ukrainians can drive right up to the edge of the bank and start firing. Sure, of course. But you don't need a complete static line of artillery as if this was a land battle. You can focus fire on batteries on these deembarkation points that will bottleneck and then creates even more devastation. So I would take those HIMARS and I would just send them straight to the Donbass. You don't need them in Kherson anymore, because just trying to cross the river to get across there, you're going to lose so many valuable troops, equipment, tanks, APCs, just stacking up and kind of getting ready to move forward, that it's going to be, it could make the cost prohibitive, in my point. So as soon as the Russians are on the other bank, just take the HIMARS and send them straight to the Donbass and let them do their thing there. Don't even worry about Kherson anymore, because the Russians can't even get across the river. So what do you need to worry about? You see where I'm going with that?
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. What I'm saying is, I would send the HIMARS because they're wheeled, they can move, but my MLRS can't move as fast, but they can keep the Russians from, because you know what they're going to do, right? They're going to go to the South Bank and they're going to now try to shell Kherson City into oblivion. So the MLRS system, because it fires 12 rockets and you don't know what target's going to be hit next, it becomes, on the defense, it becomes an area denial weapon. In other words, it starts making terrain within its reach a no-go zone. So that no-go zone becomes pretty much, I don't know, I have to look at the map, but I'm sure it's at least 20 kilometers from the river becomes a no-go zone for the Russians to move artillery in there. Because once you move it in there and the Ukrainians find out, one rocket takes out like several pieces. So that's what I'm saying. On the defense, the MLRS is really good too, because it becomes an area denial weapon. It denies you from, moving any type of piece into that area. And that's what the Iraqis found out the hard way. And those were the old, what I call the dumb MLRS rockets. Now these are more precise. So that's what I'm speaking to.
No, I hear you loud and clear. Nina, your hand's been up for quite some time. Me and George could talk for a while, but thank you for being patient, Nina. Nina, are you there?
Yeah, thank you.
Oh.
Craig, thank you. The picture you have painted, and I have heard from other people also here that the Russians are building up there in Kherson, and they are going to be quote unquote fucked. I'm thinking of the psychological effect, not only there, but about kind of a domino effect. How will it be seen in other parts of the Donbass, for example, where the Russians are? I'm sure that they will hear about it. Do you think that it can have or what kind of impact do you think it can have on other parts of the war?
Yeah, no, that's a great question, and that's kind of where my mind has been going. Honestly, is I think as CJ has said several times, and I always defer these kind of military questions to CJ. I'm much more of a logistical guy than I am anything else, but I can kind of extrapolate the logistics into what that might look like. The trouble with the Donbass is that it is just so big. It's just geographically large compared to what we're talking about in Kherson. The geographic distances are just multitudes bigger in terms of moving forward, logistical lines, moving forward with combat teams and doing what soldiers do, right? Take ground and kill the enemy. What I think HIMARS is going to be very helpful for, in my estimation, is yes, logistics. In the area around Kherson, as George said, they're useful for targeted, specific logistical things: bridges, roads, rail lines. The list goes on and on, right? Logistical hubs. But in the Donbass, you're much more spread out, right? Around that area between south of the Dnipro and the Kherson, and the Crimean, land bridge, if you will, that little slice of land to the northwest that kind of leads up there. It's a very small geographic area compared to where the Donbass is, and so HIMARS has a much bigger effect than it would say in the Donbass, depending on how you use them. Now, what I would say is that if let's say the Russians contract, right? Let's go through this thought exercise the way Nina's pointed it out. Nina's described it. Let's say the Russians, Kherson is Ukrainian, Zaporizhia is safely Ukrainian. There's a static line that runs west to east from the Dnipro, Zaporizhia to Donetsk, right? That's a static line. And the Ukrainians decide that they want to go after Luhansk Oblast and the Donetsk Oblast first. Let's just say that that's their goal. The Russians, in all likelihood, will retreat behind the Oskil Reservoir, which is to the northeast of Izum. You've retreated across that line, so now they're back in the situation that they are now in Kherson, which is they're behind a body of water, right, using the water as a defensive moat, if you will, to where they're there. So we're now back to where you are in Kherson. This is where HIMARS can have a big impact, because if you look, and I've been watching this area geographically very, very closely, because it doesn't make me nervous, but it's drawn my attention. If you look where the Oskil Reservoir is, which is northeast of Izum, to the south of that reservoir is a national forest. To the north of that reservoir is a national forest, right? So it's actually bracketed by national forest and a reservoir. So it's a very, which you might think to be, defensible line, but not if you have HIMARS. Because HIMARS can, as Georgia pointed out, can be an aerial denial weapon further back than when you can counter battery. This is the longbow effect that I've tried to use when it comes to HIMARS. You can shoot outside of counter battery fire, which gives you a tactical advantage when you're moving forward. This pushes their artillery back, which means you can move your M777s up and let the M777s do their work by supporting the infantry and the armored columns as they move forward. And so that's the advantage I see the HIMARS being in the Donbass. Pushing their artillery back outside of counter battery fire from your own artillery, letting your artillery go to work on their infantry lines, then moving up your lines further, right? And so that's kind of how I see this going. Because if it's artillery on artillery, then I know the M777 has superior range. I get all that. So I'm not ignoring it. But the HIMARS is just beyond superior when it comes to the longbow effect, right? And so you're shooting outside of a range that nobody can reach you at. And so if you do that, you're going to force them to fall back to get out of your range. When they fall back, you can move your artillery up. They're safe from counter battery fire. They have clear lines of attack, which means that area between the Oskil Reservoir to the north and that Oskil Reservoir to the south becomes much more of a pleasant drive, I should say, if you're on the attack than if you don't have HIMARS. So I see HIMARS influencing the battle like that, not so much in logistics, right? Because it's just the Donbass, you just have to pull up a map of the rail lines, the roadways, and the industrial maneuverability of the Donbass. It's so dense that you'd be sitting there with HIMARS for months trying to interdict supplies. Again, if CJ was here, he might contradict me. I'm fine with that. But I think that's how I see HIMARS being used in the Donbass area, depending, again, I'm just focusing on one part of the Donbass, right, that Oskil Reservoir. They could use it differently in other places, but that's just one picture I could potentially be seeing it used. Does that help? I know that was long-winded.
Thank you, Craig. And just to follow up, did you say that there were forests near those areas in Donbass?
Yeah. They're very dense forests there. Yes.
Okay, so that makes it like another advantage to the Ukrainians, because they know the terrain and they can.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay.
But it creates these bottlenecks when you have to move. So yes, you're right. But if you just pull up a Google Maps of that Oskil Reservoir area, there's a very thin open line between the north side, between the Oskil Reservoir tip and a forest, and then go all the way to the southern tip of the Oskil Reservoir. There's that other national forest where the line of contact seems to kind of be, right, just to the east of Sloviansk. And so I would say that HIMARS allows you the ability to push that area clear of artillery to allow your artillery to work and then move forward from there. But yes, to your point, they have a terrain knowledge advantage, but those forests, whether we like it or not, they slow down the movement of armored, heavy, brigade-like actions. And so that's why HIMARS is critical to allow the Ukrainians to go in between that window, between the tip of the Oskil and the tip of the forest. It's about a 40-mile window that you really have. That's where you would drive your heavy mechanized units, unless there's some other roads elsewhere. I'm not saying they're not, but that's the advantage of what HIMARS can do, is push their artillery back and allow that bottleneck where you would have to force your units through, which is an advantage to the defenders. It makes that bottleneck much easier of a drive than if you did not have HIMARS. But that's just, again, a small little snapshot.
Thank you, Craig. I will leave in a moment, but I want to thank you for this really excellent, at least for me, news about Kherson and what is going on there. It gives me like hope and it was really good to hear. And thank you. And also I was thinking that if there were Russians who are here listening to good advice, you have given them quite many. So yeah.
Well, I would think that if you're anybody, you wouldn't necessarily listen to somebody like me from a battlefield perspective. But thank you. I would just simply say that, you know, the Russians that are in Kherson, that are north of that river, that battle is over. The Ukrainians have won that. They've checkmated them. They've put them into the maneuver. I mean, it's effectually over, right? It's just a matter of time now. And so if you're the Russians, if you have any semblance of a brain, which of course it doesn't seem like they do, then you're not going to just leave them there. But I think that the politics is influencing the military at a very, very bad level. Again, this is where it goes back to what I was pointing to. The politics is driving the military objectives. Sometimes you think that that's right. Oh, you know, wars. It's really not. When you've engaged in combat, you go all the way back to Napoleon. You dictate policy after you've won the military victory. It's when the politicians start dictating to the commanders things. That's when everything goes south, and that's what you're seeing on the Russian side. The politicians are meddling too much in military affairs, and that's why you've seen so much failure here. Too much politics, not enough military professionalism. Tell the soldiers what their objective is and let them handle it. Don't interfere. That's what you're supposed to do. And the Russians are interfering at every single step of the way. They're interfering with what you might consider to be conventional military objectives. And so I don't think it's any great, wisdom on my part. I think it's just clear to see that politicians have no place on the battlefield and soldiers have no place in politics. Those two things need to remain separate, as they always should. But the Russians are giving a master class in they really are. They're giving a master class in how politics can interfere with military objectives. You're not supposed to mix them. You're not supposed to do it. It never works. And when you do that, that's when everything falls apart.
Well, this is what I want to hear, that it all falls apart. And should we actually help them a little bit to send them some kind of floating bananas or floating things so that they can start moving across the river and maybe halfway and then they are done. Thank you and good night to everybody.
Good night. Slava Ukraini.
Heroin slava.
Okay, with that, I don't see any hands up as of this moment. So I actually only have about Doman, if you're there, or Axel, if you're there, or Ben, if you're there. I have to go in about 15 minutes. I have a dinner. School starts next week here in the States, so I have to go with my daughter someplace. Hang on one second. I'm trying to see. Somebody sent me an article. If you guys could just be patient for just 1 second. We're going to have some dead air. Hang on one second, guys. Oh, Ben. Yeah, go ahead, Ben.
I had a few quips for you, but I think I'll just use that time to remind everyone to retweet the space. That would be very, very appreciated. We're growing fast, and anything you can do to help us reach more people would be fantastic. Be part of the growth, be part of the movement. And on top of this, if you have the capacity, we're reaching the middle of the month, so that's our middle of the month drive for Maria 8. We know, especially in Europe, a lot of people are getting their paycheck at the end of the month, and so the big money is at the end of the month, beginning of the month. But in the middle, you can maybe you've realized that you haven't spent as much, that some of the thing you thought you were going to spend on did not happen. You had a few good news, or maybe a few restaurants were closed when you wanted to join, and you find yourself with a bit of extra spare change. Don't hesitate. Give it to AmeriAid. They are always very thankful. 10 euros, $20, 30 Swiss francs. Okay, if you're in Switzerland, you can probably afford 300, but still would be very, very thankful for them. They're doing a fantastic job. They've been opening a lot recently, and I've always thought that they were good, but I wasn't expecting them to be that good. So, yeah. That being said, Haran and George, you have more questions. No, I'm going to take over from Craig for everything strategic. It's not going to be smart, but I'm going to try to make it as amusing as possible. Aaron.
Hey, I'm not sure if anyone here can answer this question. It seems like with self-propelled artillery and various other systems, Ukraine has been given something of a handful of a whole range of types. So Caesar, you name it, they have it. What is that doing with logistics? Like, the Sherman was an awesome tank for a bunch of reasons. One of them is that it was heavily standardized, and, well, you had one type of part for all these tanks, the same with the T-70, the T-34. But from everything I understand of other wars, a handful of systems and a whole range of them sounds like a logistical nightmare. Does anyone know how that's panning out for the Ukrainians?
That's the one we call the menagerie question. It's been asked quite a few times, so we've got a fairly we've got a ready answer for you. But I think George wants to answer it. So, if you want to give it a shot.
Sure. Yeah. Well, one of the things is a lot of they're primarily all using the same type of ammo, so that helps. It's all NATO standard, right? Because it's all 155 millimeter. The other thing is, as you've seen, and they don't like to talk about it too much, but in Poland and some of the other areas bordering Ukraine in the west, they have set up logistics and repair shops, and they also have some of the Ukrainians are even doing their own work on the German self-propelled guns, and they do have link-ups with the technicians that trained them. There's been reports where they've actually, got on the phone and even, let's say, with the Javelin, they were having an issue, and they called their trainers on the phone, and they had their numbers, and they talked them through getting around certain things. And then parts and things like that, I'm sure, are in the pipeline, and they're being repaired. It's not let's put it this way: the Ukrainians do not have to send the crabs that they have back to all the way to Poland to repair them. Remember, they've got a deal now with the Poles. They were given 18, and the Poles are going to deliver another 56. I'm sure that comes with parts and maintenance and all kinds of things like that with the contract. So the logistics, yes, would be a nightmare if you told me that the Ukrainians had to do this on their own, but they are getting a lot of help with that from the outside, and things have been set up, mobile repair places inside Ukraine. And the other thing is, for the allies, this is a great, great PR for them, because we're seeing that the systems that the Ukrainians have gotten are very, very capable.
Yeah, that's for sure. Like, we would never accuse the Russians of having a capable system. Actually, you reminded me of a post on Twitter that I'm sure we probably all read. It was a while ago. It was an interview with a Ukrainian. I can't remember whether it was a general or who it was. He was talking about how many tanks they had and how many tanks the Russians had, and the support that the Ukrainians were getting with their tanks. I took a couple of screenshots. I knew we'd go back through, but the tweet was deleted soon after. That reminds that. So that as another question, because he I believe he said something that the damaged Ukrainian tanks were being sent to Poland to be repaired. How much do we know about, is there a thoroughfare going on of damaged Ukrainian hardware going to Poland, getting repaired, and being sent back?
I don't know about that. I know they definitely have a deal with the Czech Republic. Remember, the Czech Republic was one of the places that was producing T-72s at one point, and so were the Poles. And remember, a lot of the work is being done in Ukraine. But I think it's when the vehicle gets to the point where it can't no longer be repaired in Ukraine, I think it was the Czech, Slovak Republic, and Poland all agreed that they would do the work for them, like the heavy work. So I don't know what necessarily that means. I don't know. They didn't say if the engine's lost or transmission or something like that. I'm not sure. They didn't go into the details, and I'm sure that's for operational security too. But they did sign a deal with the Czech Republic and Slovak Republic and the Poles to get certain systems done. I don't know who's doing what. I forget now which country's fixing which system, but like I said, that's a huge help, because a lot of the factories and repair shops that the Ukrainians have been hit by the Russians.
Yeah, it was this particular post, if I remember correctly, because it was deleted. Yes?
Aaron, I'm sorry. I'd like to add on a little bit on what George just said, just to remind everyone of the menagerie questions. Typical answer is close your eyes, try to imagine it's, say, 2013, and for some reason Russia attacks a NATO member. So all the NATO troops find their way to the eastern flank, and what do you have? You have French. Let's just look at the tanks. You've got the French Leclercs. You've got the German Leopards. You've got the Abrams, whatever it is the Brits are using, and on the other hand, you've got tons of T-72s from Poland, from the Czech Republic, from anywhere you can imagine. So what you're having right now happening in Ukraine is exactly that scenario. This is what NATO has been training, well, in reality for over 70 years, and if you include the sort of dual system, Western and post-Soviet, since the arrival Poland into Poland and the first batch into Eastern countries into NATO in 1999. So this is something that they've been training at Daventry for nearly 25 years. It's weird. It's probably not quite as helpful as if everyone was using the same material, but systems have been designed for that. They know how to do it. And beside that, there were a very interesting paper in the FT, if I remember correctly, a few months back, regarding the employment of, regarding the difficulty that Polish and Czech peasants were facing, were facing when it came to getting their tractors fixed. And in practice, that means that everyone who can work on heavy material in those countries, and I know that they came to recruit people all the way to Germany and France, are working on location that are garage, I guess, for tanks, for everything that as George said, the guys in Ukraine itself cannot repair. So there is an extraordinarily efficient and vast system in place to address this very question. It's not an easy question, but it is one that they've been thinking about a lot. They've put a lot of resources in, and everything leads us to think that they've done very, very well in addressing it. But sorry, Aaron, you had another question.
No, I was just going to say, to your point, I think all the Western tanks, I think the Leopard, the whatever it is they call it in Italy, and the French tank and Abrams, they all use the Rheinmetall 120 millimeter gun, I believe. I think they all use the same gun, except for the Challenger. That uses the rifled British gun. Although that being said, the future upgraded Challenger 3 will use the German gun. But yeah, to that point, I believe apart from the British, they all use the same gun. That's the one detail I know that fits with exactly what you two have said.
Yeah, difficult question, difficult challenge, but one that they're ready to address at a moment's notice. George, before you very efficiently answered Aaron's question, you had your hand raised. Maybe you wanted to share something.
No, that's fine. I'm good. I just wanted to wish everybody a good day. I have to get off here because someone's calling me, and I've got the 2 ankle biters that want to be fed. So I bid you guys adieu, and like I said, let's hope for the best for the next couple of weeks, and Slava Ukraini.
Thank you, George. You're extremely helpful, and I hope to see you very soon.
Thank you, guys.
Right. So, you're good people. There's presently on the panel Axel, who is Axel.
I have a question.
Give me a quarter of a second, and I'll pass on the baton to you. You've got Axel, who knows everything about everything and is not afraid to say it. You've got Oli, who can find you a T-74 in the middle of the Sahara Desert, both on the Algerian side of the frontier and the Malian side of the frontier. He's very good. He's our professional arms dealer. There's Phil, who I'd love to say something, but I'm sorry, I don't remember. But you've been here quite a few times, and also in the Isles, there's a lot of great guys who can come and answer a question on a more specific basis. So don't hesitate to come and ask the way. And you know what? If no one here has the question, there's a tons of specialists that come by, and if it's something we cannot answer, we'll make sure to ask them and to relay the answer to you, or to let you ask them to ask those questions to them directly, because that's pretty cool. And that's how cool the guys who are running this space are. Okay. Yeah, Aaron, go ahead. But please ask a more simple question than you usually do, because I'm not a military specialist. If you want to know everything about the Russian automotive industry, on the other hand, I've been reading about it a lot recently.
Yeah, I love lighters. Last time I went back to Tbilisi, they removed all the lighters. I was very disappointed. The old Toyota Priuses, they have there now. But anyway, that's a separate question. I have a technical question. So if either Ollie or Axel are talking on this panel, I can ask it. If not, I don't really have a question, but it is a technical question again.
Go technical.
My question is with Russian Air Force losses. So I asked this question before, but again, no one was on the panel at that time that could really answer it. Ukrainians reporting 233, I think, fixed-wing air losses plus. I think that's total. Anyway, but anyway, a lot of losses, but then Oryx is reporting about a quarter of it. I was wondering if anyone here can say whether the losses are likely exaggerated or whether they're more likely real, because for some reason Air Force losses are unlikely to be videoed and maybe fall on enemy lines or in a sea or something, whether that is happening, and what the state of the Russian Air Force is likely at the moment. Because if the Ukrainian loss, claimed losses are correct, then that is a very seriously degraded Russian Air Force at this point, if they've really lost 200 planes.
Aaron, let me ask you a question in response. Is there something that the Russian Air Force is doing at the moment that leads you to believe that the Ukrainian numbers for the Russian losses are absurdly inflated? Is there anything that the Russian Air Force is doing right now that is leading you to think that, oh my God, they're in such great shape, they cannot have lost that many airplanes?
On that, my thoughts are more like that the Russian Air Force has never been doing that much, from pretty much day one. So no real change there. Notably, of course, the Russian Air Force was absent for the May Day parade, so we'll give you that. But in terms of has the Russian Air Force decreased significantly over the battlefield, they were never that big as far as I understand since day one. Also, Russia is a very vast country, so I'm not sure how much of the Air Force they are actually willing to commit. Yeah.
Well, ultimately, there's no way of knowing exactly the amount of losses, especially for airplanes, considering that, you know this as well as anyone else. The Russians may very well bring back a lot of planes that do manage to land back on the airports, but on their airbase, but at the end of the day are unusable. So unlike with tanks and things like that, there's a strong possibility for the Ukraine numbers in this case to be actually underestimates rather than overestimates. And as a result, maybe the Russian Air Force is a giant in waiting that the Kremlin is keeping in its sleeves for God knows what reason, because if there ever was a moment to use it, it's now. They like this is they're doing too smart by a mile at the moment. So I frankly, honestly, and I think no one on the space would contradict me on this, it's unlikely to be a ploy. They're using their Air Force as much as they can, and whatever they're losing, and whatever they're showing us at the moment is pretty close from the best they can do. Unless they've got some Wunderwaffen in the Isles waiting to be engaged, there's no chance on Earth that the Air Force is going to do any better. And there's actually recent evidence of this, which is that the Ukrainian Air Force, which in its case had been kept as unscathed and unarmed as possible, is being used increasingly with more aggressivity and more efficiency, and increasingly more commonly, at least in the south, with new tactics being developed that show that they are extremely confident. That being said, I'm good with Air Force because I'm winging it, but I think my friend Alex is actually able to say things that make sense.
Good morning, Ben. Kia ora, Aaron. How are you?
Kia ora. I'm pretty good, mate. I'm in Tunisia and it's pretty hot here.
I imagine it's pretty crisp down here. So you asked about whether Oryx's, essentially the premise of your question is whether Oryx's figures are accurate. And what I would say to that is that Oryx's figures aren't the total figures. It's important to understand what Oryx is tracking. What he is tracking is visual evidence of destroyed vehicles or aircraft. And so what Oryx's figures represent are a baseline. So they're not an exaggeration and they're not a underestimation. They are a collation of a large number of audio-visual sources. And they are, from what I understand, pretty rigorously cross-checked. So Oryx and his team are published in the defense area domain, and so they hold themselves to a pretty high standard. So I think it's important to understand what Oryx's figures actually represent. So
yeah, exactly. That's a great point. So yeah, they are baseline, and I fully understand that. So for everything, I add a mental percentage. So with tanks, at least 30% to whatever they have. So he tracks at just over 50% of claimed Russian tank losses. That's been fairly consistent, I think. But the really outstanding one is the airplane losses, which are tracking at somewhere around a quarter. That's why I'm bringing that one up in particular, because it's around...
So just to aircraft losses, the reality is that air combat is highly... because you're dealing with objects moving very fast at very high altitude in some cases, it's very hard to track and verify those losses or those, let's face it, Ukrainian victories in the air over the Russians because of the fundamental nature of the type of combat that's occurring. Now, the reality is we're still finding shot down aircraft from World War II. So that sort of gives you an idea as to how difficult that might be for Oryx or any other open source project to actually track those kind of victories over Russian forces.
You know, if Russia really has lost 130 fixed-wing aircraft, it is pretty much buggered.
Aaron, I'm sorry.
That's a fair assessment. Sorry, Ben, go ahead.
There's one detail that is bugging me a little bit. You're saying that Oryx is showing about 30% of the tank losses, and that's fine.
No. I mentally add at least 30% as a baseline.
Okay. So, but if I recall correctly, they're saying there's something like 4,000 vehicles that have been killed, that have been destroyed, or 5,000, which is about a third of what the official sources in Ukraine are claiming. And okay, I don't have the numbers for the planes, but if you say it's 25%, and I'm no great mathematician, but 30%, 35% on the one hand, and 25% on the other doesn't ring any alarm bells in my book. I don't understand why you focus on this.
The easy one to cherry pick in the categories there is the tanks, and the tanks track at about 55-60% of claim losses. So in specifically the tank category, because the other armored categories and truck categories might break down into who knows who's categorizing exactly what is what. But when we go to main battle tanks, it's a pretty easy category. So just using that one as a baseline.
Okay, so we'll all agree on the fact that the Russian Air Force is toast. Talking about toast.
I'd caution against using, like Oryx himself says, is very upfront, and his team are very upfront about what their data is and isn't. What it is a representation of losses that are recorded through audiovisual sources, right? What it isn't is a database which you can use to do detailed, statistical
alert update.
analysis.
Full alert. This message has been generated with municipal data.
It's an indicative source, not an empirical source. I think is like the data is empirical, because you can say, okay, this tank blew up at this time, this plane blew up, this is where it was recorded, but the actual set is not complete. And I think it's very important to remember that. But yeah, look, I think it's fair to say that that the Russian Air Force is struggling to make itself felt. Gurney, did you have something to add?
Yeah, hey, thanks, Alex. Just listening here for a minute. I came up here. I probably caught the tail end of it. I thought I was hearing FUD, fear, uncertainty, and doubt, and whether this is with Oryx's numbers or with other things in general. But again, too late to the program to have caught it.
Full
but
alert.
Yeah, good.
This message has been
catch there,
generated
Alex,
with municipal data.
Explaining exactly what Oryx is and isn't.
Oh yeah, for sure. So my question was more like I know exactly what Oryx is. It's just establishing, are we that less likely to have some sort of visual recording of airframe losses relative to tank losses? Like, obviously, every Oryx loss is going to be undercounted because you need confirmation, and statistically, you'll never have confirmation of everything, and some things will be recovered, taken to the back of the line, but be unusable. Obviously, that's going to happen. But just with the airframe losses in particular, it is really pronounced. That's why I'm bringing that up. And if those numbers are correct, then they are incredibly damning for the Russian Air Force, because not only have they lost 230 odd fixed wing aircraft, I believe, they have lost them. Specifically the aircraft that are serviceable, obviously, and the ones that are useful in this particular campaign in those particular roles. And if you take Oryx's losses and you multiply them by 4 to get the total, like in the categories that he's like of the type of planes, like the Ka-52, which is obviously a tech helicopter.
Aaron, what's the multiply by 4? I must have missed something here.
The 4 is because he's saying about 50 helicopters and about 50 fixed-wing aircraft, when the Ukrainians are claiming to about like approximately 200 in each category, very approximately. So that's the by 4. So 50 versus 200.
Maybe I'm missing this here, but this is...
There's a time for statistical analysis of conflict losses, and it's not... There's a time for statistical analysis of these kind of losses, and it's not during a genocidal war. The kind of data analysis you're suggesting could probably be done after the fact, once Russia's been driven back into its hole. And I think that's the time for it.
That's fair enough. Like, if I could just make one last point. My point is also that from a quick check of what the inventory Russia has, like, my point is more just like how damning it is for the Russian Air Force. So if this is all correct, then if the losses are in the categories that Oryx has been tracking, like for example, there's no MiGs lost in Oryx's listings. So if they are all in
you and I had a discussion about MiGs why MiGs are underrepresented in Oryx's factors, and one of the reasons is that they're not used in frontline aviation. So of course they're underrepresented because they wouldn't be represented in that data set. So we've talked about this before, Aaron.
Oh yeah, that's my point. I'm not getting at that. My point is that if you multiply it by 4, then Russia has potentially lost half of all its aircraft that it's actually using in those categories. Like half of all its Ka-52s, half of its Su-34s. Like that is like really damned and bugging. That's the point I'm getting at. Like Russia might have 1,000 aircraft, but in those categories that it's using, it may have lost half. Like that's the point I'm getting at.
Yeah, look, at this point, the Russian army, they've just been publicly dragged in front of the entire international community through having one of their air bases, destroyed in detail. I just don't think that, apart from their ability to do anything other than, terror bombing at this point seems to be largely mute. It's just not a factor. And, in terms of, I just don't think, doesn't really matter at the end of the day what source lines up with what. You can, the proof is in the pudding. There's no we don't have any evidence that the Russian Air Force is really effective in any meaningful way at this point. So I understand that you're trying to reconcile different sources and things like this. I just think it's a bit of a futile effort in that there's no real end point to it other than your own self-confusion, as it were.
Alex, can I ask you a question?
You can try.
I know I can try to ask the question. My English is poor, but not that poor.
Not if I have my strength.
No, what I meant to say is, let's start from the assumption that the losses are roughly in the order of those 230 planes, and that the planes that have been shot down are those that we say, that the Ukrainians say have been shot down. What is the impact on an air force? Because I need to be honest, The last time I looked even vaguely at air war was when I was reading about the Battle of Britain, and 230 planes is basically what the Germans were losing every day. So it doesn't sound like much, but maybe you can tell me how impactful it is.
Sorry, how impactful? What is the air war at the moment?
No, the losses, the Russian losses. How impactful it is.
You don't go around rehiring, retired Air Force colonels as private military contractors because your air war is going swimmingly. I think that's a just a given factor. I think that the Russian losses are probably in the order of what the Ukrainian sources say. I think that you can see by the way they're operating that they're clearly not confident that they have air superiority in any way or even parity. I think it's fundamentally a very contested zone. Yes. I've just woken up. I'm having my coffee, so you'll forgive me for rambling and muddling a little bit. But has anything happened in the last, say, 8 or 9 hours that is significant, Ben?
Well, I've got something to share with you, but maybe you should have your coffee first, or maybe it's better if you don't. I mean, don't have any coffee in your mouth while I'm saying it. Is your mouth empty right now?
I am fully prepared. Sans coffee and or garlic eclairs.
I'm not exactly sure of the details, but based on what I understood, Igor Girkin tried to do something in Crimea. If I understand correctly, some people said he was trying to defect. Other people say he was trying to lead from the front and get all the glory. And in any case, he's been arrested. Basically the guy from whom everything started, who has on his hands the blood of over the 200 people who died in the MH17 attack, has been arrested by the Russian FSB and probably being accused of treason. And Axel said that it was probably a ploy, but and I can strongly believe that because they tend not to advertise their movement like this. But if it's a ploy, it's a damn funny one.
If it's
Alex, say that again. I couldn't hear you. The mic trailed off.
I was just compiling my thoughts out loud. Obviously,
I can give a response here to the.
Yeah, go ahead, Gertie.
No, I was just gonna bend to your comment there about Mr. Girkin and whatever may or may not be happening. You know, remember at the end of the day, the guy is a turncoat in many ways, and I don't know if anyone had actual real verification of the story, because I think to top it off, some of the sources for the story were perhaps another turncoat himself, a Shishko, but. So suffice to say that I'd love for it to be true, but you know it's probably never true. There's no justice through the FSB, but you know it's of dubious nature, and I love to laugh at it. It made made the round news, and I think Ilya Ponomarenko had made a comment on it. And, also spoke of the potential dubious nature of the allegations here. But whatever happened there, that man, Mr. Gherkin, doesn't deserve the title of Mr. here. But I thought I'd say that. Either it doesn't really matter here. That gentleman will at some point meet his own justice, I'm sure. But what we can say for certain is that it probably will not come from the FSB.
Yeah, so what I would say is there's only one place Mr. Gherkin belongs, and that's in Den Haag. Anywhere else is insufficient. That's all I'd say.
And there's another piece of information that you may be happy to hear. Apparently, the command and control of the Russian forces on the right bank of the Dnipro, so the one taking care of the Kherson region, is now on the left bank of the Dnipro. So they're kindly told their soldiers, we don't think the situation is very nice, but you're welcome to die there. We're going to see on the other side what's going on. Must be great for morale, and not terribly efficient in terms of communication. And on top of this, I think it must be Domin who mentioned the fact that these people, the Russian army tend to have lacking NCOs, having their officers on one side of the river and the soldiers on the other side of the river is a recipe for disaster, which led a lot of people to start thinking that this battle could be over faster than expected. That being said, I like Wendy with his fantastic avatar has come and has probably more information to share.
Thank you, Ben. This Russian invasion of Ukraine and its genocide of Ukrainians, it has many perpetrators. The man known as Igor Gherkin, Strelkov, whichever alias he goes by these days, he is a perpetrator who holds significant guilt for war crimes committed in Ukraine. Back in 2014, when Russia invaded Ukraine, he was partially responsible for the murder of the passengers of MH17, 298 innocent people who were shot down under his command. Also murdered under his command were proud Ukrainians, a lot of them young people who went onto the streets in places in the Donbass where they proudly showed their Ukrainian flags, were hounded by individuals, whipped up into a frenzy by the likes of Gherkin, Strelkov, and they were murdered. There were graves dug in parks, in places like Lysychansk and Sloviansk in Donbass. And these people were, back in 2014, already martyrs to the cause of Ukrainian freedom. I hope that he gets released by the enemy authorities so that he can be recaptured by Ukraine's liberation forces, because Ukrainians have the right, they have earned the right to deal with this man and to make sure that justice is done for him, because his legacy
Siren alert update.
of crimes against
Kharkiv,
Ukrainians
all clear. This
does not
message has
go
been
back to
generated
February
with
of this
municipal
year.
data.
It goes back to 2014. So I hope that, and I'm sure we would all agree that Ukrainian justice will last for many, many years, far beyond the conclusion of this war. And there are many Ukrainians who are owed justice from this war and the
siren alert
aggressive actions.
Kharkiv, all clear. This message has been generated with municipal
committed
data
upon them by the Russian Federation. Thank you.
Thank you, Alec Wendy. You're perfectly correct. For all the interest and the speculations and the talks we're having, this is something we should never lose from sight. There have been untowable crimes committed in numbers that are just bone chilling, and we should never let go in our thoughts and never stop fighting for revenge.
Air siren alert update. Kharkiv, all clear. This message has been generated
Alex,
with municipal
your hand is
data.
up, and so is Granny's.
Yeah, I just wanted to thank Wendy for his saying far better than I ever could what I wanted to say. Yeah, and it's important to remember that Gherkin's crimes and the atrocities he has perpetrated on mankind stretch far beyond Ukraine. But thank you, Wendy. Gurney.
Yeah. Hey, has anyone spoken of the Copenhagen conference recently that just happened here about a day or two ago, and any of the results specifically? Have we mentioned it recently?
Not over the past few hours. We were there at the beginning, the first announcement, but we heard a lot of more is to come, but I'm not sure we've heard more in question. At least I haven't.
Yeah, hopefully we'll start to get some more specific news releases. The one of the last ones, and news releases from official sources, but one of the last ones I see a couple outlets are picking up on reporting. It's that Poland, Slovakia, and Czechia are going to do a production program to expand production of artillery systems, munitions, and other military equipment there. So that's a new angle, a new interesting one, or a new. It might have been talked about prior to Copenhagen, but to my ears, it hasn't. So it looks like they're talking about expanding commercial production or civilian production, or some mix of both of those with government backing here. But that's pretty good news. Has anyone else heard some Copenhagen statements?
Well, if you have, you're welcome to come on the panel and tell us about it, or maybe send me a tweet and I will relay the information to Gurney. Actually, a tweet just arrived. Maybe that's what it is. Yeah, a confirmation of what you're saying. Poland, Slovakia, and the Czech Republic have decided to launch a program that will expand production of artillery system, munition, and other military equipment to Ukraine.
And maybe Doman had mentioned this earlier here. There's a Polish company referenced. I'm not familiar with them, but I'm sure to the Europeans they might be Mesco. And it looks like there was a separate announcement where they're not only working overtime to produce some of the 152 millimeter shells, the Ukrainian Soviet style shells, but that they're going to go into overdrive perhaps to continue that and expand that.
Oh, that's fantastic! I thought the idea was that nowhere was it produced anymore except Bulgaria. But if Poland can join the fray, that would be amazing.
Yeah, and it being the weekend here, probably in terms of news cycles as they go, or at least official releases, probably the slow time, right? I think the Copenhagen conference was Thursday or potentially ended on Friday here, but European time. But anyways, I expect more releases from that maybe Monday or Tuesday, as we usually see like sort of a trickle of information come out, sort of staged country by country, and as they talk about some of the agreements, and sometimes from those meetings it can take some more days to get to those official releases, because sometimes it still seems like after the meeting itself they're sort of coordinating the details, and then they tend to make those official announcements. Alex, I'm just going to go back to a couple references early on in the war here, when there was some Australian contributions, and the news cycle would sort of pick up on some commitments, and then it would go silent for a couple days or a week, and then we would get some much more concrete, solid information, like when some of the Bushmasters, I believe, were sent, right? But there's a bit of a time lag between the conference or the event and then some of the official statements.
Yeah. Sorry, Ben. Go ahead.
No, I was about to say that it made a lot of sense. But if you have something more to say, you're welcome.
No, I think that the lag makes a lot of sense. In that a lot of the stuff, especially for smaller militaries, where the stuff has to be pulled out, checked, reconditioned, and we can't all live in nations that can afford to have pre-deployment stocks, or pre-deployed stock. So yeah, that there is a little bit of a lag with it, where everything has to get checked and so that it gets dispatched. So yeah.
Okay, I'm going to use my powers of co-host to threaten the audience. If no one comes up to ask questions to Alex and Gurney, and I like Wendy, who are, wells of knowledge. They know a lot, and they're very good at expressing what they know. If no one comes up to ask a question, I will start talking about the Russian automotive industry. You've been warned. I've seen the hour. In 5 minutes, no question has come. Russian industry it is. Okay, there's already one.
Or nuclear thermal rockets.
Can you discuss the Russian automotive industry in comparison with, say, the Australian automotive industry?
What automotive industry in Australia?
Well,
Here,
the one
siren
we used to
alert
have.
update. Donetsk.
You mean the one
alert.
you used to have?
This message has been
8 years
generated with
ago,
municipal
whatever it
data.
was.
Okay, I've got two rabbis raising their hands, feeling like I'm back in the yeshiva. I like Wendy. Go ahead.
Thank you, Ben. I think it was Bertrand before me, so I'm very happy to wait. Thank you, sir.
Well, I just felt threatened by the co-host that has a special powers. So I thought that I was actually trying to figure, maybe you guys have more information about that. What is the current status with Igor Girkin? There is apparently conflicting information. Some sources seem to say that he's been arrested by Russian forces because
Siren alert
of
update.
reasons that are not entirely
Donetsk.
clear. So
Full
if
alert.
anyone has
This
a
message has been
primer,
generated with
so I
municipal
don't
data.
spend the next half an hour on a Saturday trying to figure out this, and maybe some people in the audience would appreciate that too. Anyone has a more clear picture of the situation there? Thank you. I am back to my rabbi status.
Thank you, Bertrand, for the question. I'll take this on here because I don't think there's a lot of people who actually have clarity on this bit of info. But I'm going to expand upon perhaps the why. The why there might not be info, or the why that it doesn't matter. But just humor me the point here. So when it comes to this man, a very slippery man to begin with, I made the statement earlier that I doubt very likely that the FSB are going to be the ones to bring this slippery gentleman any semblance of justice. And if that proves to be incorrect, just remember what he occupies, whether he occupies the role of sort of an anti-message, anti-establishment type message. We can do this. So whatever current caricature he is playing, right? Depending on whichever passport he's operating under or name he's operating under here. I guess I would make the larger point that it's kind of irrelevant. It's irrelevant because he's part of an opera of narrative bullshit, and you'll never get the truth out of it. Even if he were arrested or were not arrested, you'll never get the truth out of it. And that's exactly what it's designed to do. It's designed to inspire and captivate sort of your attention here, because many people would like to see justice brought to this I'm not going to say gentleman, to this man, and that's exactly why it makes the rounds here. That's why this is picking up some viral momentum, because he has angered quite a few people through his abhorrent actions over the years. And while I would love for it to be true, it's simply never going to be as simple as that. But it is alluring and it is captivating. And I'm just going to focus on that and say, so because it's simply captivating, the timing of it is doing exactly what it's designed to do. It's there to captivate. And whether you can understand it or not understand it, and whether he was arrested, wasn't arrested, or in my personal view, the man is a lot more slippery than that. But anyways, that's what it's to do, to captivate our attentions here, and probably to draw some discussion in. I mean, there are some valid questions about this, but it's like answering the question of timing. Why this? Why now? And simple answer: Saki Airfield, right? Why the talk about Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant? There's been months of Russian occupation of Zaporizhzhia. Why are we discussing this in the narrative space, as of recently? And again, timing, and you just ask, who's timing? Well, Russian narrative timing, right? The firestorm, the fire hose of bullshit and up or down. It's to really captivate and capture the conversation space. And so while there's a lot of legitimate questions about Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, and this space answered quite a few of those very well with Mark Nelson yesterday, I suspect that the Igor Girkin, Strelkov, whatever you want to call him, that's going to do the same thing, just in a different news cycle, right? And I would expect more of these things to happen, especially as the Russians are failing to make progress, and there are very large, notable distractions to their message vis-a-vis Saki Airfield. And so while things aren't going to be gravy for the Ukrainians here, I just like to say is whenever you get these things that are very juicy like this, they're sort of designed to get us to talk about that, because we aren't talking about other things. We aren't, we aren't asking different questions. We aren't, looking at other areas. We're looking at things that sort of designed to be dangled in front of our face. But I hope that, Bertrand, that's no offense to you, sir. I appreciate your comment.
No, it's not offense. Actually, it makes a lot of sense, Garni. I like your answer, and I think it does make sense. Just one possible nuance. In this case, I am not sure, but it's open doubt. In fact, I don't know how much of an actual platform outside Russia Igor Girkin has. He has had the same visibility back in the days because of the notorious let's call it airplane crimes. He committed more crimes after that, but I'm really not sure if he can make the headlines. But maybe I'm wrong. Maybe he will make the headlines.
In the probably to the Russian narrative, the beautiful thing about a person or persona like that is that he's believed to have 9 lives. Whether that's true or not, he's merely a man, but he's got 9 lives. So if this one doesn't work out too well in the narrative space, they can always try again to say he was redeemed in some capacity or rearrested again. But the print the myth, print the legend.
Thank you.
Well, it's interesting that they're using this sort of ploy at the moment, because ultimately they may not have so many. It's a bit like high precision missiles. They have a few, but not so many, and they've clearly run out of anything related to Putin's health. So now they have to move on to something else. And the fact that they're using one of their few remaining cartridges may indicate that they're really worried, and that, you know, Gurney, if Gurney is correct, and Gurley is always correct, that sort of cover up, they don't have many left in them, hopefully.
Gurney mentioned that, you know, this sort of story is brought up to distract us from things that are happening in the real world. Would that include more strikes against bridges in Kherson, as my DMs are suggesting?
I think your DMs are correct, but I don't have much more information than that. How many bridges are left on the Dam River?
There were 4.
Yeah, Ben, I think there were 4 in total, right? The bridge across the Novokakhovka Dam, the Antonovsky Bridge, a rail bridge north of the Antonovsky Bridge, and I forget where the 4th one would be.
That was next to the dam bridge. Essentially, there were 2 bridges there. There are still somewhat, if they're still there. So the strikes tonight that are being posted are regarding the Antonovsky Bridge, and it was not in good shape before. So I wonder how bad in a shape is now. But I guess we will find out tomorrow.
In Bertrand, I'm Special Kherson Cat is probably asleep at the moment, but when he wakes up, this would be a great opportunity here later this evening for North American time and morning Ukraine time to have Special Kherson Cat come back on here and talk about some of the updates of the day, because a lot of us have those questions. Is this rumor true about Russian command in the Kherson area moving to the, whether it's a result of these strikes or numerous strikes over the last 2-3 weeks here, moving to the east side of the Dnieper?
I will just leave to Wendy because he's very patient now. But just regarding the sleep cycle of a Special Kherson Cat, he was tweeting until a few minutes ago, so I would not exclude that he's still awake. But I will shut up.
Okay, well, open call, Kherson Cat, if you can hear us, or if somebody connected to you can hear us and they speak with you in DMs, please send a mention to Kherson Cat. We'd love to have him up here tonight to talk about whether there's some truth to this.
He's probably up hunting for some special Kherson mice. I like Wendy. I've got one question before I'll let you say what you have to say. Do you forgive me for this terrible joke?
Of course, sir. Thank you. I just had a comment and a question to make before I drop down. My comment was that Ukraine has a long arm of justice, and Igor Girkin, Strelkov, whichever alias he goes by, the murderer of innocent civilians in Donbass, whatever epithet he goes by, Ukraine has and will have in the future a long arm of justice. The families of the MH17 murdered victims, they also have a long arm of justice. He and the other perpetrators of the genocide in Ukraine, they can run, they can shave their eyebrows off, as Girkin did today. They can change into whichever clothes they want to. They can dress up however they want. But Ukraine has a long arm of justice. It also coincidentally has an absolutely fantastic organic weapons system production. But that's just coincidental. But the crimes which were perpetrated upon Ukrainians in 2014 when Russian weapon systems were moved into Donbass to murder Ukrainian civilians and bury them in their local parks, this was not committed during the Circassian genocide of the 1800s. This was a genocide committed during the Information Age, an age in which records of war crimes are kept, an age in which audio recordings of people saying that they had just shot down a civilian airliner, these are kept. The internet never forgets. So unlike the murderers and the barbarians of the past during the Circassian genocide, the barbarians of this particular era that we live in, they have a different form of accountability which affects them. They can run, but they can never truly hide from their crimes, and they will be pursued. So the long arm of Ukrainian justice is very long, and whatever Girkin chooses to do, and whatever the fascist state of Russia chooses to do with him, it's going to be in vain. So thank you for this space, and Slava Ukraini.
Thank you, Alec Wendy.
Herom Slava.
Gurney, before we move on to other discussions, I sent you a DM. Could you be so very, very kind as to have a look at it? For everyone else, it's a Ukrainian journalist found his way into Kherson, and it went through the trash of the Russian troops, and they found what, from my untrained eye, looked like hundreds, potentially the low thousands of, I think it's medicinal alcohol or medical alcohol that have been emptied, and nothing else, strongly suggesting that this is actually the alcohol has been used to drink, not for any medical use, implying that the Russian troops at the moment in Kherson are drinking themselves to, at the very least, to sleep and potentially to something else, and which means that it must be terrifying for the civilians, but which also means that just like the commanders, they are aware of the dire situation they are in, and unlike the commanders, they cannot escape to other places, but they can. All they can do is attempt to forget about it by getting completely blind drunk with this sort of this cheap medical alcohol. It's called ethyl alcohol. I'm not a doctor. I don't know. What it implies.
Ben, so I took a look at that photo you just sent me there, right? I'm gonna take the word of the captions on it. So take this with a grain of salt here. They look like they're alleged to be the ethyl alcohol bottles, but ethyl alcohol, as opposed to methyl alcohol, you can drink ethyl alcohol. It's probably not pleasant by itself, but it won't make you go blind or kill you like methyl alcohol. When we talk about prohibition or denatured alcohol, that's when you add methylated alcohol to ethyl alcohol to sort of spoil it for human consumption. So I'll take the word of the picture of this, but it sparked a couple of things in my mind here. If that's what's going on, or there's some other things going on, but either way, it clearly looks like small medicinal bottles of what are alleged to be ethyl alcohol, and alleged to be from pharmacies, or these could be taken from med kits or ordered in. But I had two concurrent thoughts when I saw it. Sure, they could be drinking this, and that's unfortunate. And it's unfortunate because ethyl alcohol, or at least medical grade ethyl alcohol, usually has some purity levels for it. So I'm not 100% sure what's going on in the picture, but if they are drinking it or taking it from pharmacies or taking it out of med kits, that's really not a bright idea, because especially in a time of war, something like medical grade ethyl alcohol, pure, that is, it has a certain purity level, is something that you don't want to be wasting drinking, because for every bit of wound out there, that's exactly what you would use this for most circumstances where you can use alcohol to cleanse wounds topically. That's exactly what this looks like it would be used for. So that's very unfortunate, whether they're getting them from med kits or they're ordering it in through units or ordering it in through pharmacies and drinking it. And then the only other thing I can come up with is if they're not drinking it, then this is just a result of ordering hundreds of bottles of ethyl alcohol due to the nature of the wounds and the amount of wounded. But either way, it's neither of those two options is a good scenario for the Russians. I mean, wasting ethyl alcohol when you clearly need it for hospital grade things and field grade dressings and wound control, even basic things. Some of these guys have been in trenches for weeks at a time here. I mean, little cuts on your foot and you're sitting in a trench and in mud and in the same socks for weeks on end. Bacteria will build up, and clearly it's just unfortunate that they're drinking this and wasting what should be an otherwise scarce or precious resource, especially in a time of war. But yeah, I saw that picture and I thought those were the two thoughts I had in my head.
Okay, thanks. The reason why I sort of think that they're probably been drunk rather than used for any medical use is the fact that they're not. There's nothing but those bottles in this pile of trash, and there's no paper, there's no old band-aids, there's nothing, there's no anything else but those bottles. So unless they absolutely have nothing else to use than this, not even band-aids or I'm sorry, my medical English is dreadful. I have no idea how you treat a soldier, but there's nothing else. So it really looks like they went for the biggest bowl of margarita. Is it called margarita? Yeah, let's call it margarita. The biggest bowl of cocktail punch. The biggest bowl of punch in their lifetime, and they're drinking it. Well, it's probably not going to do a world of good for their fighting ability, or it may be a form of humor, because the next time the Kherson partisans are going to try to kill a Russian, he'll be able to look at them and say, I got there first, I killed myself with alcohol. So that's altogether very, very positive, I think. Okay, I'm gonna share an information that I could not verify, but that sounds logical. Gurney, you were asking about Copenhagen, and you mentioned that there was a lot of financial pledges that had been made. It's probable that some of the military help that has been announced is more or less directly related to this meeting. It can be completely by chance that Denmark announced the fact that they were sending a number of instructors to Britain to help train the Ukrainian forces virtually 24 hours before the opening of the meeting. But apparently the question of the visa ban has been mentioned, and you'll never know who shows up whenever I said the word visa. Nick, do you have any information about the visa ban being discussed in Copenhagen?
No, I just wanted to say the standard alcohol that we use for medical purposes these days tends to be isopropyl alcohol. Maybe Russian medicine or Russian field medicine hasn't caught up with that yet, and you certainly won't want to be drinking that. Do I understand they've run out of vodka?
Air siren
You know,
alert
Nick,
update.
I just got a DM
Michael
about that
Live.
too, and I think
Full alert.
perhaps
This
maybe
message
we
has
can
been
get some
generated with
non-Western
municipal
listeners
data.
here. I think depending on where you are in the world, so we're used to isopropyl alcohol, which is not drinkable for medical uses. But depending on the purity of ethyl alcohol, it can be superior to isopropyl because it doesn't evaporate as quickly as isopropyl. And so I guess it comes down to the production, what part of the world you're in, and what they're producing. But the reason I say that, Nick, you bring up an interesting point, right? We're not going around. We don't drink ethyl, or we don't drink isopropyl alcohol. We don't drink methyl alcohol. But if you look at the video Ben sent, if we could post it here, there's a bunch of those little brown medical type bottles with sort of the plastic tabs on top to break them open. Maybe not even a quarter pint in there.
Siren alert
even
update.
smaller than
Michael
that. But
Live.
it looks
Full
pretty
alert.
interesting.
This
that
message
these
has been
pharmacy-type
generated with
bottles
municipal data.
are sitting there, like he said, just piled up in giant boxes after having been opened.
Did you tweet that, Ben?
I'm about to.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, ethyl alcohol is readily obtainable by distilling fermented almost anything, I guess, rather than a pharmacy needing the pharmaceutical industry. On the other hand, if you did it by distilling something, you would probably end up with something relatively drinkable. You know, if you did it by distilling potatoes. Certainly one should not drink pure ethyl alcohol because it doesn't just dilute. You know, you would actually want to sort of have it as a minimum with Coca-Cola or something. But it's quite hard to get pure ethanol.
Okay, there is someone with the name with the word potato in his name that is joining the panel. I'm going to risk the assumption.
Formerly known as Herm. Sorry, Ben. Formerly known as Herm. I'm just going to laugh at this because at some point in the middle of the night last night, Herm, or Potato Geddon here, gave a wonderful rundown of some Dutch potato sticks.
Yeah, I heard about it, and I'm very, very sad I missed it. I think I'm going to have to ask the team to find a segment and so I can listen to it. Or maybe Erm will be kind enough to give me the gist of the potato. The amidon. Starch.
That will be clipped according to Axel. And please clip it when with Domen launching the topic after. It was just gold. All those contributions to the potatoes were just gold. Isopropyl alcohol, you can drink that stuff. It's not going to kill you like methyl alcohol. Not going to make you blind. It's pretty potent. It fries your brain really heavily. And yeah, we should encourage the Russians to drink isopropyl alcohol if they have it. That's my point.
Herm, if I could here, could you give us the breakdown? Just, since you gave a molecular rundown last night on potato sticks, could you possibly give a rundown on ethyl alcohol or why it might be present in different parts of the world versus isopropyl? I don't know. We don't know what's in the containers, but it was alleged to be ethyl alcohol in the pharmacy containers.
Yeah, for the purpose of disinfection, they should work both just fine. And I think you covered it previously pretty well. That is, whatever you have, wherever your production chain is, where you draw that raw product from, that you then refine to medical grade alcohol for topological treatment, that's what you're probably gonna choose. The isopropyl alcohol has a few benefits over the ethyl alcohol when it comes to acute cleansing of wounds. It's a little bit more aggressive to germs. It is also as you said before, or somebody else, evaporating faster. So that gives you some kind of cooling effect together when you're cleaning wounds. And it smells like very strong. It's very sharp. hospital smell it has, which is supposed to actually incentivize people not to drink it. So that's all a bunch of reasons why it's used medically. But to why the Russians are using one over the others, or what would they have there, that's, I don't have no idea.
Okay, that's very important because...
Sorry, Ben, just one thing I noted. It's probably not Russian stock they were drinking. It's most likely Ukrainian pre-existing stock they robbed from pharmacies and hospitals. So it's actually what the Ukrainians would be having in stock. That's what they're drinking.
I almost said potato here. Herm, could I ask you? Either way, I would think that the supply chain in that area for the Russians is fairly limited, considering the circumstances. But if all of these individual pharmacy type bottles are being used or ordered for consumption for drinking,
Gurney, I'm so sorry to interrupt you. You came out very choppy. Could you repeat this? Because at the end you were perfectly audible, but at the beginning, at least, I missed what you were saying.
Yeah, thanks, Ben. Sorry, can you hear me now?
Yeah, loud and clear.
Okay, no, I was just gonna ask Herm.
He's choppy again, I'm afraid.
Because Herm has a specialty in working in the medical field. I was just going to ask.
Herm, did you get his drift by any chance, or?
It was choppy for me too, but I think I have an idea where the question was going to. So this type of alcohol is medically mainly used for when you. Not really the sterilization of open wounds. It's more for when you put IVs or needles that penetrate the skin into the human body to sterilize it before and after to prevent infection. So that's the main usage in regular circumstances. And in a battle situation, you probably have more trauma sterilizations, like open trauma. That's going to be sterilized potentially with that, but the regular usage is for needles and putting IVs in the human body, so in the arteries and so veins in the veins.
Thanks a lot, Herm. I'm sorry, I'm trying to read something in Danish, so I'm a bit lost. We're going to go to Phil, if you have a question related to alcohol. Otherwise, we'll go straight back to Herm for some more alcohol questions. Phil? No? Okay, people are dropping fast. Hans, can you hear me?
Yes, mic check?
Yep, loud and clear.
Okay, with regard to ethyl alcohol, we in university, which was some time ago, used to get it if we had drag or connection with the biological students. It is extremely desiccative, has a very strong affinity for water, and it's used in biological labs, or it was at that time used in biological labs. If you wanted to do a thin section or examine something under a microscope and you wanted to get the water out of it. So it was immersed in pure or damn near pure, I think 98% ethyl alcohol to do that. As far as drinking it goes, if you can imagine slicing a razor blade across your tongue, that's kind of what it tastes like if you drink it pure. I can't recommend it, although yes, it has been done. That's really it. It's it's very intoxicative, obviously, because it's about 3 times the strength of your, well, a little bit under 3 times the strength of your normal whiskey, rum, what have you. But, that's the stuff you do when you're a student. There's not much impurity in it, so the hangover is not that bad. And that's it for human consumption. But I was wondering, and also, Ben, I have a question for you in just a moment. I was wondering whether it wouldn't be a possibility to drop a bunch of, several containers of these little brown bottles filled with methyl hydrate, which is methyl alcohol, and just label the damn things in Cyrillic, methyl alcohol, and drop them among the Russian soldiers, or would that be chemical and biological warfare? So that's one thought. The other thing is, Ben, for you, if I am standing on the bank of the Dnipro River and looking upstream, is the left bank on my left or on my right?
The left bank is the bank on your left when you're looking downstream.
Downstream, okay. I thought yes. Ben would know this quite well because of rive gauche et rive droite.
That's yes.
Yeah, it's the same thing.
That's it for me. I think maybe we could collaborate on a shipment of nice little brown bottles of methyl alcohol. Straight to the front and across the front, obviously. All right, thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Hans. That's good thinking. Okay, Gurney is coming back as soon. Hans, I'm gonna drop you. You said you wanted to go, and I'm bringing Gurney back, who probably has a much better understanding of military law than I ever will. Okay, so 3 hands up, Scott, JJ, and Daryl, and then I will indulge myself with some question to Herm, if he can stick around.
Actually, I'm gonna be swimming now, so I'm gonna be gone for 2 hours.
I'm sorry, can you repeat this? I didn't get it.
I'm about ready to go to the swimming pool for 2 hours, so.
2 hours? Oh, that's impressive. That's impressive.
Training, exercise.
Amazing. So, I'm sorry. Can you summarize quickly for me the fact that is it dangerous for? No, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm blanking completely. Scott, please go ahead. I'm gonna find my footing.
Yeah, I wanted to see if there are any markings that you guys can tell on the bottles in terms of a percentage. Usually ethyl alcohol will come in something like 100%, which would probably be denatured, 95%, or something like 70 or 80%. Because, if it's pure ethyl alcohol, to break the
Well, that's rich. You broke at break.
I'm looking at the video now very close up, and I am attempting to transcribe what I can see on the label, and I'm not sure it is alcohol. It has it doesn't have on it the Russian or Ukrainian word that I would associate with alcohol. It's got a, but I know very little about the language. I can kind of transliterate from Cyrillic into Latin, and I'm just doing a bit of Googling to see if I can find a similar product. It seems to say Zutilovia. I can't do all of the other concepts.
Nick, that's a shame, because I was hoping that you could transliterate that to maybe say sent from Hans with love, methyl alcohol.
Yeah, I think that would be a bit of a giveaway if we did that. But it's a really, I'm sliding along frame by frame, which, yes, okay, we've got a 95 on the label. We have a 95. In fact, it has a percent, so we've got a 95%. But you have to kind of put it up in the Twitter video player, which is quite nice. I use it sometimes when I'm looking at N-law strikes and whatever, because you can pause it and then you can drag the slider along frame by frame. So Stilovdia, it might be a brand name, and it has it under that. It says 95%. The rest of the lettering, I think, is too small. It does have an inflammable symbol on the bottom, which is, I guess, true. I mean, ethanol isn't terribly inflammable, but yeah. So I will go and see if I can find this particular bottle.
Okay, I don't think I've ever broached a subject that brought so many DMs. There's so many drinking stories that are landing there, all hilarious.
Air siren alert update.
Thanks a lot for sharing it.
All clear. This message has been generated with municipal data.
Did you have something to say? Sorry, I dropped you at some point because we couldn't hear you.
No, Hans came back up though, so maybe he'd like to add.
Yeah, Hans, you broke a break.
Okay, I just wanted to say that with regard to 100% ethyl alcohol, that is virtually impossible because of its extreme affinity for water. If you want 100% ethyl alcohol, you have to put some kind of desiccant in the bottle with it, to the best of my memory. So the most concentrated you can hope for is something like 98%.
This message has been generated with municipal data.
So 95% makes perfect sense. And given the agricultural production of Ukraine, I think ethyl alcohol, which is, just simply ethanol, period, 10% ethanol. Same ethanol you put in your gasoline, reluctantly. Anyway, that seems a very logical sort of thing, that it should be ethanol and not isopropyl. It can, of course, be denatured, which means that you can't drink it. They put in some kind of a poison, and it's put in such
this message has been generated with municipal data.
Such a nature that you cannot redistill it to get rid of the additive. Because it will distill over with the alcohol. It might be denatured, it might not. But in any event, 95% is quite reasonable. And again, I think we should transport a couple of 1,000 bottles of methyl hydrate, which is methyl alcohol, over to the Russians, and they will all go blind.
I have an update. So what I thought was Stilovsky. It was not a Z, it was an E. I'd forgotten that there's a backward-facing E in the Cyrillic alphabet, and so it says Etilovi, and that is, according to Google Translate, what we call ethanol in Russian, although not in Ukrainian, interestingly. So the word, it's Etilovi spirit, S-P-I-R-T, spirit, I guess. So, yeah, those little bottles, it says ethanol 95% on it. It's got the name of a cosmetic. Well, it says Tospon Cosmetic on top, which I presume to be the name of the company that makes it. Maybe they make it as some kind of makeup remover. So, yeah, 95% ethanol. The question would then be what the other 5% is. In many countries, we denature ethanol partly to stop people going off and then diluting it and using it as hooch. Although in Spain, you can buy very pure alcohol for surprisingly little in terms of tax, because people use it to make their own limoncello and other preserved fruit liqueurs. But in Britain or France, if you get ethanol, it's always got methanol in it in order discourage you from drinking. Anyway, yeah. So it does seem that it's etylovine and 95% ethanol. I don't see a poison symbol on it. I only see the flame symbol. So maybe it's 95% ethanol and 5% something that won't actually harm you that much.
Donetsk, full
So,
alert.
I will
This
continue my
message has
research.
been generated with municipal data.
Thank you. Then I'll have a question for you, Nick. Once you've brought us some further information, JJ,
Yes,
your hand has
I've
been
got the
up for a
bottle.
while.
I've got the bottle.
Don't spit in it. JJ, go ahead.
Thanks. I'd like to change the topic if that's okay with you, Ben.
You're not changing it. You're just creating a parenthesis because I'm sure we'll return to it.
Thank you. Well, it's hard to forget the kerfuffle with Amnesty International from a few days ago. And I just saw on Euromaidan Press that Amnesty International has agreed to an external evaluation of its controversial statement.
Here's Siren Alert update.
They say that they
Donetsk,
want to
full
understand
alert.
what exactly
This
went
message
wrong
has
and
been
why
generated
in
with
order to learn
municipal
lessons
data.
and improve their work in the field of human rights. They say that they regret the press release devoted to the study, and it was published without sufficient context. It sort of sounds a little hollow, and I did tweet this to Alex. I'd love to get people's feedback on this and see if my radar is on about it. Thanks.
Did they actually say they regret the statement, or do they say they regret it if anyone was offended, which is the way you sort of have a non-apology? But if they actually say they regret the statement, then maybe they're having to backpedal a little bit. That didn't sound too Weasley to me, and I would have expected something a bit more Weasley, frankly. So maybe that's
the way I read it. Hang on, let me just bring it up in front of me. It's sort of like we regret that we didn't add the conclusions were not conveyed with the delicacy and accuracy that should be expected from Amnesty. This also applies to subsequent communication and reaction of the International Secretariat for Public Criticism. We condemn the instrumentalization of the press release by the Russian authorities. Now, that's pretty much as close to, we're sorry you were offended, as you can get without saying it, isn't it, Nick?
Sorry, I forgot. I think it will depend who they get to do this external evaluation. So when you do this sort of thing, you always earn yourself a little bit of a right to a temporary ceasefire, but you create expectations and let's see what the report says. Let's check that it is from someone who is independent, and let's see if afterwards they change. I think those are more important than the exact words that they use here.
Yeah, I think my feeling is that as you hint, Nick, it's all very yes, Minister, and the reality is that most of their press releases so far have focused on the fact that they didn't convey their conclusions with sufficient accuracy and other sort of non sequiturs like that. And it's like, well, the issue isn't the way in which you conveyed your conclusions. The issue is the premise upon which your conclusions are based. And until they address the premise of their conclusions, it's, as you say, all a bit wishy-washy.
Thanks. Daryl, your hand has been up for a while, but before you ask a question, can you be so kind as tell everyone to retweet the space and maybe give them an idea of what they should be saying? Nick, we can hear you lighting up a cigarette. Yeah, Daryl, can you do this? Give people an idea of what to write when they retweet the space.
Say that again.
I love your way with words, so I would like you to give people an idea of what to say when they retweet the space.
Oh, okay. Well, typically what I do is if we have something going on in the space, particularly like the picture of the bottle of, just I'll make something funny, or if it's a serious subject, I'll say something serious, maybe ask a question, because people may have questions and you just kind of lead them. Questions are leading sometimes, and if you use them right, you can get people to come in. That's really how I do it.
Okay, thanks. Very good advice. Can you? Yeah, you had a question. Is it
okay? Yeah. Okay. First, I'm gonna back one subject, and then I'll come forward with the Amnesty International. The first one is, could they be using that many bottles? Could they be using it for fuel? I'm not sure if they're using like gas powered or whatever type drones, and they could be using these, or they have vehicles that could be needing fuel, or they can be using it to eat with. I mean, I'm sure it's not cold over there, but for food, I'm not sure. That's something that, just using it plainly as fuel rather than something that they're actually drinking. Because drinking, if you ever mistakenly picked up a bottle of alcohol and because sometimes I use peroxide as a cleanser in my mouth, but you ever mistakenly picked up a bottle of alcohol, that's not a very pleasant feeling in your mouth. So I would probably be leaning toward them maybe using it as fuel, unless they're trying to pour it over some fruit and do something weird with it. But when you're desperate, who knows?
Daryl, I really don't think they're using it as fuel. I just found the product for sale on a Russian website. I've just tweeted it. It says Cosmet lotion, ethyl, 99 milliliters. So it is some kind of, some kind of face lotion. Well, I mean, these words are a little difficult with Russian and lotion and whatever, because it is 95% alcohol. But on the store where I found it, the online pharmacy, it's under home, then beauty and care products, then facial cosmetics, then cosmetics for problems skin, and finally Cosmet lotion, ethyl, 99 milliliters. So apparently it's zit lotion.
That's what I was going to say. Sounds like something for... Are they having problems with mosquitoes over there real bad?
The bottles are 99 mil. And they cost 71 rubles, which I think is about $1. So that's, I mean, at whatever exchange rate we're looking at. So that's quite an expensive way to fill up your BMP, particularly because most of these things are diesel engines, and I don't think ethanol is going to kind of take the place of fuel oil anytime soon.
Well, I was just thinking, if they're trying to use certain, like a sterno setup, something like that, if they were trying to cook with it, or like I said, if they had drones with little gas motors on it, which I doubt, but that was just, it was just a thought, because that many bottles, that's incredible for somebody.
Well, that's what you would expect a pharmacy to receive from the factory when they order, 600 bottles. I mean, in wholesale quantity. So I don't find that particularly surprising.
But to be drank in that quantity, though, that's what I'm talking about.
Well, maybe there's 600 guys. Maybe there's 600 guys in the unit, and they just all, they just all had one daiquiri with it.
Daryl, could I chime in and add to this? I think many a silly person has probably tried to drink Sterno. I wouldn't put it below the Russians to try to drink Sterno, if they were to have Sterno as well. But yeah, to Nick in this case, it looks quite obvious in those bottles. I mean, they're pretty much not single-use bottles here, but looks like they're getting hooched by another means is what it looks like.
Okay. All right. Now for Amnesty International, looking at that situation, somebody needed to get a story out real quick, and they probably were working for somebody. We've seen who they've been influenced by. We've seen, the bad actors in their group. Somebody wanted to get something out, even though they know it could be retracted later. They were trying to get this out on purpose. That was put on purpose. Even though all of these different apologies have come forth of varying sorts, this was intentionally to put a dark stain on the Ukrainian forces.
Yeah, that sounds like it. Gurney, you wanted to speak about Amnesty International?
Yeah, there's two things. Let me speak to Amnesty International, but let me close up my alcohol-related comments here. There was a completely unrelated, different video that came out on Twitter today. I think it was released by some Ukrainian special forces. In it, and I'll get to the point here, to Daryl's point about this is potentially drinking here. It was a little confusing because you see a Ukrainian soldier, you see the gun perspective coming up on what looked like a former Russian encampment. Not many people around, and the soldier is going kind of slow and cautiously. There's a red sleeping bag. Everything's in camouflage, but this bright red sleeping bag, which is kind of silly that everything's in camouflage and it's super bright red. But I'm just trying to set the picture for you. But anyways, this soldier is going very quietly and slowly. And I think at some point he realizes that there is a soldier asleep, a Russian soldier asleep under that blanket or sleeping bag or whatever it is, and you then see the Russian soldier sort of awake, very shocked that there's a gun pointed to him. And all I can ask myself is awful statement in Russia's weaponizing it. So that's one end of it, part and parcel.